Our story begins in 2047. 25 years have passed since portals nicknamed the Gates of Hell began to open all over the world. Since then, the world has changed dramatically, and humanity has become extinct. Only one person managed to survive, and he succeeded in this thanks to the incredible power that he was able to obtain in the apocalypse. Many would call him lucky if he managed to survive. But you can't even imagine the torment of living in a world where you are the only person and there are only monsters around. But despite this, Marco never stopped fighting. Every day in the apocalypse, he did everything possible to correct the mistakes of the past. And now, 25 years later, he has a chance to change everything. During this time, the man changed a lot. Marco gained powers that are impossible to even imagine. Having collected the last piece of the missing puzzle, he decided to celebrate this event in an abandoned bar. Today for him was not just Victory Day, but a day of opportunity to fix everything, when suddenly the severed head of the demon screamed. There were rumors about one survivor who kills high-class monsters. Who would have thought that this was true? But why do you need this? You won't fix anything anyway. We've destroyed all the people. Having finished his glass of wine, Marco looked at his head with indifference and replied, "It's too long to tell. You'll see everything for yourself soon." You may have a question about our hero's silent partner, but we'll find out more about him a little later. After finishing the celebration, Marco went to a secret place that caused horror in the demon. After the disappearance of humanity, a mysterious slab appeared, which said that the one who collects 666,666 heads of the highest class demons can break the timeline and turn back time. Of course, Marco assumed that it was just a trap to lure out the survivors. But being the only person on the planet, he had no choice but to hunt demons, and this last one. When the only empty space was filled, the demons began to scream. They convinced the man that he would achieve nothing by doing this, but would only see the destruction of humanity once again. Their words dispelled Marco's doubts regarding the message on the slab. He had come this entire way with only one goal. Just imagine, he survived an incredible number of battles and was on the brink of death just as many times. And all just to see his little daughter, whom he couldn't save. "I feel how the forces are leaving them," the demon shouted. "Don't think that you will succeed. They will not leave this just like that." They? I will make sure that you achieve nothing, and I will definitely kill you. Those you're talking about, they were the ones who opened the portals and let you in here, and came up with this stupid task, Marco asked in a tired voice, when suddenly a notification appeared that the legendary quest had been successfully completed. And this meant that the man received a unique, one-time use skill. Regression. After this notification appeared, energy began to burst out of the demons' heads, which penetrated Marco more and more, giving him strength. After the skill absorption process, the apocalypse world began to collapse, and with it, all the ruins and demons. The regression skill worked exactly as the message said. A person can go back in time. For Marco, it was just a bright flash that lasted no longer than a second. Seeing his hand, on which there was not a single scar and all the fingers were in place, the man could not believe his eyes. He succeeded, and all those long years in hell were not in vain. Realizing that this is not a dream and everything is real, the man jumped out of his bed like a madman and headed to his daughter's room. Don't think about anything. He opened the door and shouted with all his might, "Alice!" Luckily, his daughter was safe and sound, sleeping soundly in her crib. Seeing her serene face, Marco was overcome with memories. More precisely, memories from his worst day. First, the apocalypse. Several hours passed. It so happened that during an attempt to evacuate, the building they were in partially collapsed, and little Alice almost fell from a great height. But Marco managed to catch him at the last moment. But his right arm was broken, and his left arm was pinned to the floor by arrows. No matter how hard he tried, his broken bones prevented him from lifting Alice up. He could hold her as long as it takes until help arrives. But at that moment, a monster appeared, causing the building to begin to collapse. This demon deliberately attacked the little girl. And in the end, Marco saw how the most important person in his life became food for the demon. So when the man saw his daughter alive again, he couldn't hold back his tears. This time, he promised to protect her at any cost, even if it meant his death. The girl woke up because of the man's tears that were flowing down her hands. Although the man dreamed of meeting his daughter, he was still not ready for it, because he could not forgive himself for her death. Running out of her room, Marco fell to his knees and began to sob. He still found it hard to believe all of this, and at the same time he understood that he had no time for tears and joy. For the day is approaching when the gates of hell will open again, and demons will flood the streets with blood. Remembering everything that had happened to him over the previous 25 years, Marco was only worried about one thing: whether it was her husband or he who would protect Alice all this time. Unlike last time, he is not the same anymore. He has knowledge and experience. When suddenly a notification appeared that Marco had received a magical power. Spirit Eyes! Our hero didn't understand what was happening because skills could only be obtained after the start of the apocalypse. But apparently he is an exception, since he was already in it, and besides, Spirit Eyes is the same skill that he had before. Our hero did not know the exact reasons why his strength returned to him. It could be due to a broken timeline, or it could be a regression feature. Now, in any case, it was even better for him because the chance of saving Alice became much higher. Marco returned exactly 3 days before the gates of hell opened. Thanks to the information received from the demons, our hero knew that there were already people who knew about everything. They are called the 8 battle stars, or prophets, and they were chosen by the 8 phases and given incredible abilities to progress. In the apocalypse, Marco was able to intercept many achievements and rewards that were only available to them, thanks to which he was able to survive and reach the very end. Since there was not much time left before the gates of hell opened, our hero decided to act immediately. Right in the middle of the night, he went to one of the hiding places intended for the prophet. And this hiding place was located in a little-known underground shopping center. Realizing that incredible danger lay ahead, Marco intended to take all the prophet's powers for himself. Going down, the man saw many closed shops. Everything looks completely different now, not like it did in the apocalypse. So finding the right store is quite problematic, and barging into every single one is very stupid, because it can attract unnecessary attention. Luckily, the phases turned out to be quite short-sighted and put a sign on the right store. They were sure that ordinary people would never be able to fulfill their mission, Regression, so they were so careless. Entering the empty and gloomy store, Marco heard the old man's voice from the void. How strange. No one was supposed to come today. How did you find me? It sounds like you weren't expecting a visitor, our hero replied with a smirk on his face. That's right, what brought you here? The old man added. You know, I just woke up and realized I need to buy something from you, Yaka, Marco shouted with a wide smile. After these words, the innocent, hoarse old man revealed his true appearance. Yaka is one of the legendary demons of the apocalypse, which Marco destroyed in his past life. So as soon as he heard his real name from a stranger, he realized that there was no longer any point in hiding, and immediately attacked our hero. Marco noticed that, just like in his past life, this demon was extremely fast. And despite the fact that the demon grabbed him, the man was calm, because he knew that the Yaka would not kill him. At least first, he will try to find out from Marco everything he knows. Coming closer, Yaka began to peer into the face of our hero, after which he said, I don't know you. Who are you? Does it matter who I am? I came to pick up the prophet's quest, and I know they're passing through here, Marco replied. How did you find out about this place and about me? Who told you? But it's impossible. Nothing has been decided from above yet. The result should only be tomorrow. Yaka asked, perplexed. Everything is right. That's why I'm here. I want to earn the place of the Chosen One and become one of the 8 battle stars, Marco replied. Could it really be you? The demon whispered, after which he began to laugh tirelessly. His laughter was so loud and powerful that the blinds of the closed shops began to shake. I know what you are. You're the one everyone's talking about, the regressor who collected all those high-class demon heads. Naive man. Did you really think we wouldn't find out? The phases have foreseen everything. They don't exist in the same dimension as us, and they sense the refraction of timelines, and they warned us about you. Since you had the courage to come to me, the Yaka demon, I will give you something as a reward. Information. You're screwed. You spent a quarter of a century in the apocalypse, and did you really think that you could change anything? This world is just a game of higher phases. And you mixed up all their cards by simply angering them, the demon added with crazy eyes. I don't care about you or them, Marco shouted, after which 3 daggers pierced the Yaksha's hand. The demon didn't expect such an attack, because in this period of time he had never encountered anything like it. The man dusted off his coat and said, I wanted to cut off your hand, but it seems my body isn't ready for that yet. Although that's not surprising, I don't have any special runes. You pathetic man! How dare you attack me? The Yaksha cried out in fear. But here you are mistaken. Regression is part of the plan of your great phases. They don't care about you and me, they just want a spectacle, Marco replied. Enough chatter, it's time to do what my brothers couldn't, added the Yaksha, going on the attack. And at that moment, a foreign aura began to be felt in the room, after which the demon felt like someone or something hit him right in the face. And after this, he did not see the attacker again. When suddenly Marco said, I understand that the head is just for decoration. Apparently, you don't understand what it means to be a regressor. Didn't you realize that I killed all the demons to complete this stupid mission? 666,666 high-class demons have fallen by my hand, and you were one of them, our hero added with a smile. Yaksha is a demon that feeds on the fear of other creatures. But now, he is scared. This is the first time in his entire existence that he feels primal fear. Eventually, he weakened and turned into a small demon that looked more like a plush toy. Seeing this, Marco couldn't help but whisper, finally. And now that you're ready to listen, I'll tell you 2 things. First, until the gates of hell open, members of your race cannot kill people. Those are the rules. Second, the reason I was looking for you was the package you were in possession of. And also, don't try to kill me after opening the gates of hell. I know more than you think. Yaksha isn't your name. It's just your appearance. Your real name is Kuryu, our hero added. How do you know my real name? The demon asked in a squeaky voice. Laughing, Marco replied, Q, you and I are very close friends. The demon couldn't believe his ears, because he was created to destroy people. Listen, little man, I'm not some kind of servant of yours, the demon shouted angrily. And in response, Marco only looked at him menacingly. At that moment, Kuryu again felt that same primal fear, and realized that he had no other choice. Otherwise, he was dead. When suddenly this demon summoned a huge magic bag which served as his inventory. The phases appointed him responsible for the preservation of the scrolls and contents, but under threat of death, he submitted to the regressor. For Marco, this was not a revelation. He knew that everything would be exactly like this. Kuryu is a harmless demon, at least until the gates of hell open. And our hero knew this, so he easily obtained the prophet's first bundle. By opening it, the man gained access to the prophet's store. For the beginning of the apocalypse, it was perfect. Here Marco could buy almost any weapon. The only problem was the price. Even the weakest mage's staff cost 400,000 demon heads. When suddenly Q said, "Stop looking in vain. You won't be able to get the required number of heads anywhere anyway." But our hero simply ignored the demon and continued to explore the store, and eventually found the item he was interested in. It was the scroll of the Yaksha race. After thinking for a bit, Marco said, "Listen, I think you want to give it to me." And at that moment, silence and bewilderment reigned in the room. "Are you completely crazy? Have you even seen its price? How can I give it to you?" Kuryu cried out in surprise. The thing is, this item could be obtained in two ways. The first was to buy it for 80,000 demon heads, or receive it as a gift from the Yaksha if you have a friendly relationship with him. And when did we become friends? Back when you tried to cut off my hand, remind me. I've forgotten. Oh no, probably when you hit me in the face. Now think about it. Why should I suddenly give you anything? The enraged Kuryu shouted angrily. Without saying a word, Marco grabbed the dagger that was sticking out of the demon's hand and began to pull them out one by one. Holding the daggers in his hand, our hero said, "See? I pulled them out for you." "You know, it actually really hurt," Kuryu screamed, after which our hero threw 20 million won at his feet. "What is this? Do you think you can bribe me with some puny pieces of paper?" "No, I may be a demon, but you can't buy me," Kuryu added, throwing the money aside. Moreover, the demon knew perfectly well that in 3 days, this money would turn into ordinary candy wrappers. And yet Marco was persistent. He said that Q would still need this money. "Take them. In 2 years, they will save your life during the night of pitch darkness, whispered our hero. This made sense because Marco knew what would be valuable and what would not. I know what you were created for, but everything is in your hands, and believe me, money always decides, even if there is an apocalypse outside the window, added our hero. The man's confidence made Demon doubt his ideals. Besides, money has no meaning for demons. I understand that Marco is very cunning. What did Q say? Let's say you're right, but what if you're lying? I already told you everything is in your hands. You can believe me or you cannot. But don't forget that I know the future, and I know that without money you'll die in 2 years, our hero added, pulling the last dagger from the demon's hand. What happened in the future that made you so evil and cunning, like those Nagas? Q answered, grimacing comically. Don't worry, you'll find out everything soon, Marco said with a smile. Having taken the money, the demon nevertheless decided to give our hero a bundle of yakshi. But now the question arises, what to do with it next? It turns out that this bundle is intended for the demon to record all events. With the help of this package, Marco will get a ticket to the prophet's test. Even though I don't care about you at all, how are you going to pull this off? The demon asked unexpectedly. But this question remained unanswered. Instead, our hero began writing something down in the package, when suddenly the space broke. A hole appeared in it, like in a broken mirror. It's time to meet the phases, Marco whispered as he entered the opening portal. The phases can be compared to gods, so meeting them is fraught with consequences. Nevertheless, Marco decided to take this step because he understood that they would not deprive themselves of the pleasure of watching him. Upon entering the portal, our hero immediately felt an incredibly powerful aura that suppressed all his abilities. The place where he found himself looked like the Milky Way, only instead of the sun, there was a huge eye. And also there was a long road along which the man walked forward. Q was very surprised by how fearless our hero was in the face of the power of the phases. And unlike Marco, he was afraid of meeting the Creator. What he feared most was that they would punish him for his betrayal. At that moment, the man noticed that the demon was following. "Why did you follow me?" Marco asked in surprise. To which Q replied, flustered, "Just keep going. Someone has to witness your horrible death. Besides, I wanted to ask you something. You've regressed, so it's no surprise that you know some apocalypse. Although no, you know a lot about the prophets of the phases and even know about their missions. But what I'm interested in is that there should be a chosen prophet in your place. Are you even familiar with him? Or do you absolutely not care that you're stealing your comrade's privilege?" Q asked thoughtfully. Marco knew very well who should become the prophet and come to the Kuryu. It was supposed to be a guy named Derek, who would be nicknamed Ghost Howl. During the apocalypse, Derek became virtually immortal. From this phase, he gained the skill Necromancer, which allowed him to resurrect demons. He was on par with Alec, the most powerful being from beyond the stars. But for people, it became just another piece of trash that had to be gotten rid of. After all, his insane strength made him a madman and a psychopath. To resurrect the monster, he needed spare parts. Derek experimented on living people to obtain good materials. Even in the apocalypse, he was considered a true monster. The demons were more merciful than he was, and one day Derek's hands reached Marco. However, our hero decided not to talk much about their meeting, when suddenly Kuryu said, "Listen, I know that in your past life you were incredibly strong, but now you are an ordinary person. You should be more careful. Judging by your calm face, you still haven't realized whose you've just disturbed." But this was not entirely true. In the apocalypse, our hero had already encountered phases, and he had something to say, when suddenly a powerful voice rang out from the darkness. An unexpected guest. From the notification that appeared, Marco learned that they had entered the chambers of the Lord of the Snake family. "Kuryu, what is this man doing here, and why do you look like this?" "Entrance is permitted only to chosen prophets, and you are not the one I chose," the Lord said in a monotonous voice. "Choosing not me was your biggest mistake. You should have chosen me from the start," Marco replied brazenly, after which the huge eye began to vigilantly examine our hero. Trying to get rid of the man, Q shouted, "Lord of the Seven Snakes, this man is a regressor. He is a high-level demon hunter." "Interesting. So it was you who changed the whole game for us. There is no doubt that you have enough spiritual strength. But you still don't measure up to the level of a prophet," the phase replied thoughtfully. Realizing that empty talk wouldn't solve anything, Marco suggested that the Lord of the Seven Snakes personally test him and make sure he was better than Derek. Although the phase didn't answer, it was clear that this proposal interested him. When suddenly, memories appeared before Marco's eyes from the very moment he lost Alice. This is one of the abilities of the master of the family, to see the past and future of a person. He wanted to make sure that Marco was truly fit to be his prophet. After looking through the memories of our hero from the apocalypse phase, he said, laughing, "I wonder if the regressor who broke the timeline was my follower. Now it's clear why you came to me and demanded something. But make no mistake, you're just an ordinary person." Getting down on one knee, our hero whispered, "I am absolutely right. I am only a man. And you, an all-powerful piece of shit who doesn't watch his mouth," the man suddenly shouted, rushing at the Lord with a dagger in his hand. Not even a second passed before the dagger pierced the all-seeing eye of the Lord of the Seven Snakes. From what he saw, Q lost the power of speech. He understood that now they would not leave here alive. Cutting into his eyes more and more, Marco added, "I am not your follower." To his surprise, the eye was intact and unharmed, and he released a huge blast of steam to throw our hero back. With his current level of power, attacking the phase was stupid. But after going through the entire apocalypse, Marco didn't care about it. When suddenly the Lord said, "What a surprise! Then where did you get this power?" As our hero assumed, although the Lord is a supreme being, he does not know everything. Realizing this was the perfect opportunity, Marco replied, "This power was given to me after the regression. Perhaps this is my reward for the dedication I showed in trying to survive that hell." After these words, the Lord of the Seven Snakes finally showed his true appearance. His appearance made everything around burn with hellish purple flame. Not knowing what to expect from such a powerful creature, our hero prepared to fight. However, the Lord of Semisme did not show any aggression. He only repeated his question. "Where did you get this strength?" Realizing that everything could be resolved peacefully, Marco said, "The prophet you have chosen, he voluntarily handed it over to me, considering me to be the strongest." At that moment, 3 huge white snakes appeared from the void. Having listened to our hero, the Lord whispered in a thoughtful voice, "Just think. The great regressor is my devoted slave. I think you deserve me to listen to you and think about your proposal. Considering your previous achievements, I can draw several conclusions. I'm more than sure you were able to obtain the witness of the sun and the moon. But to me, that's just a useless achievement. And believe me, I was deeply touched that having gone through all this, you came to me. But I've already chosen my prophet, and I never change my decisions," the Lord of the Seven Snakes added with a smile on his face. Marco sighed heavily and replied, "No, that's not true. Apparently you weren't informed about the conditions of regression if you think so. I'll tell you a big secret. In the future, I'm the only survivor. All your vaunted prophets are dead. I didn't come here to beg for the position of the chosen one. I want to give you a chance. I told you this, Q, and I'll tell you again. It's all in your hands. You can choose, Derek. That decision is yours. But then I will bring victory to the other phases. In that case, I warn you, your prophet will be the first one I kill. It is very reckless to say such things to a demigod who can destroy you with a snap of his finger." But after the apocalypse, Marco was not afraid of anything. He had enough spirit to threaten the Lord of the Snake family. Of course, the phase could not leave our hero's words just like that. He was going to take the man's life right here and now, so that he wouldn't interfere with their game again. And despite the real threat to his life, Marco continued to insult the ruler and say that he was his only chance for victory. There was a reason for our hero's audacity. He knew that the higher beings could not kill him because he was a regressor. For the Lord of the Seven Snakes, this argument was quite compelling. After all, in that case, his chances of victory were far greater than anyone else's. "You were able to convince me, which once again underlines your importance," the higher demon whispered thoughtfully, leaning on his throne. When suddenly a bright column of light appeared next to our hero, and a moment later some skinny guy appeared in that place. Just by his unkempt appearance and awkward speech, Marco knew it was Derek. "Hey dude, who are you and where are we?" the prophet asked with a blank look. But before our hero could answer, the uncomprehending guy was crushed by a huge demonic hand. After which the Lord, laughing, shouted, Oops! It seems something happened to my prophet. Now this place is free. You would think that Marco should feel terrible because a person died because of him. But he felt like a hero. Now that Derek has become a pool of blood, flesh, and bones, Marco has become a prophet from the Lord of Snakes. After being recognized as a phase, our hero had to go through the process of becoming a prophet. With the help of a magical pentagram, the Lord awarded Marco the power of a snake prophet and opened access to the snake treasury. The first stage of our hero's plan was successfully completed. First of all, the Lord introduced the man to the snake treasury, in which the triad of poisonous doors was kept. At the moment, the Lord has opened only the copper door for our hero, but everything that is stored behind it can be used. Now that Marco has become the prophet of the Snake Lord, they can be considered allies, so the phase revealed his real name to him, Yoram. Although there was no need for this because our hero already knows all the names of all the phases, but it is better for them not to know about it. Having become better acquainted, it was time to take a look into the copper treasury. All this time, Kyoryu was next to them and tried not to stand out. He was afraid just from Yoram's presence nearby, so our hero's behavior surprised him even more. And besides, as a lower demon, the entrance to the snake treasury was closed to him. And frankly speaking, he didn't care at all. He was just glad to be alive. A couple of hours later, the gates of the treasury opened again. By this time, Q had already fallen asleep. But he was awakened by a loud cry. "Kyoryu, wake up! It's time for us to go, let's go!" Marco added as he passed by. After leaving Yoram's lair, our hero was incredibly silent. It was clear that he was constantly thinking about something. Returning to the human world, Marco first began to check his inventory, when suddenly Q asked, "Listen, I wanted to ask, what were you doing inside for so long?" Taking something out of his inventory, the man replied, "I was looking for this." The thing he had been searching for so long was the helmet of the legendary monarch Leoric. Leoric was known as the most arrogant king in history. When used by a living being, this helmet drains the wearer's life force. But when used by a dead person, it grants great power. For Q, our hero's choice seemed strange, because this helmet was absolutely not suitable for him. The demon even tried to find out why Marco chose him, but in response he received only a menacing look that promised trouble. "I wish you to stay alive," Kyoryu praised our hero's choice. Suddenly the man ordered the demon to get the bag, to which he said, confused, "What? But you don't have heads." Taking a bag out of his coat, Marco whispered, "You're wrong. Here they are, 100,000 heads." Smelling the strong scent of demonic blood, Q was surprised. "What? You managed to beg the Lord for so many heads?" the demon added. "Yes, Yor kindly shared them with you," Marco answered with a smile. "It's none of my business, of course, you're a prophet now, but if the Lord of Snakes gives something, he then asks for 3 times as much," Kyoryu whispered excitedly. "Are you really worried about me?" "Don't worry, I know about him. I won't give him anything back. He's in my debt, and this is how he's paying it off," our hero replied, his eyes wild. Yor is worried that Marco might become a target for other prophets because he's a regressor, so he gave him these heads. He also laid out some conditions, a test of sorts. Our hero must perform something equivalent to a regressor feat, something like killing 666,666 high-class demons. This is the task of the Lord of Snakes. And since this task was received from one of the phases, the reward in it is appropriate. Having learned about all this, Q froze in horror. He still couldn't believe that this was happening to him, when suddenly Marco said, "I need the one that can only be found for 100,000. Let's be honest. Finding something decent for such a small price was quite problematic. But the demon found a couple of suitable options. None of the proposed options suited Marco, but he understood perfectly well that nothing better would happen. In the end, he chose a sword called Head Off with Shoulders, which cost 77,000. This weapon had no special powers, other than turning a weak-willed person into a maniac. Also, our hero now needed a scabbard to store his sword somewhere, but they all cost an insane amount of heads. So Q gave him the simplest scabbard. With this act, the demon wanted to show his devotion and goodwill. After all, in the conditions of the coming apocalypse, having a prophet as a friend is very beneficial. Having received all the necessary items, Marco asked, "What time is it now?" "About 3, why?" answered Q. "It's funny. Why are all the shops closed then?" asked our hero. "The whole point is that the phases have placed a special barrier around this place, through which only the prophet can pass." When Chio asked what he was going to do next, the man replied that he had things to do. Marco didn't give any specific answers, but the demon assumed that our hero would now begin the hunt for the prophets. But everything turned out to be much more banal. The man wanted to pick up his daughter from school, which caused a whole wave of misunderstanding in Kyoryu. As he left, Marco said goodbye and promised that they would meet soon. Our hero spent the remaining 2 days before the start of the apocalypse with his daughter, while doing daily activities, going to school, doing homework, shopping, and game nights. He wanted to live like a normal person for at least 2 days. For him, it was a small island of paradise on the eve of destructive chaos. On the day the gates of hell were to open, Marco and Alice prepared supplies. The man told his daughter the whole truth about the coming apocalypse, and despite everything, the girl believed him. "Listen, Alice, we've been preparing for the apocalypse for the last couple of days. But why did you believe me?" Marco asked. "Why do you mean? You're my favorite dad," Alice answered through laughter. Every time he saw her smile, the man understood that those long years in hell he had fought for a reason, and was ready to fight again until the end of his life, so that that smile would never disappear from her face. From early morning, our heroes went to the city cemetery. They wanted to lay flowers on the grave of their loving mother and wife for the last time. But that's not the only reason they came here. Marco had arranged a meeting with his old comrade in the service. As a soldier should, he saluted his superior, and that boy's name was Marty. During their service, Marco and Marty became good friends, despite their different ranks. But after the service, their paths diverged. The guys grabbed a cup of coffee and sat down on a bench, after which our hero said, "Listen, there's a reason I chose this particular meeting place and not downtown Seoul. Marty, you may think I'm crazy, but please hear me out." Noticing how nervous our hero was, he said, "Captain, relax. I'll listen to you no matter what you want to tell me." With a heavy sigh, Marco continued, "Okay, now imagine that today is the last day of humanity. Would you believe it?" Marty choked on his coffee after hearing this, and the guy laughed and asked, "Did you drag me to the outskirts of town for this joke?" "I wish this was a joke," Marco whispered, staring into his glass. Knowing our hero well enough, Marty understood that he was speaking seriously. A moment later, an incredibly powerful earthquake began. With each passing second, it became stronger and stronger, and the people around were seized with panic. At first, Marty thought it was just a coincidence, so he used his experience to start evacuating people, while Marco just sat there. "Captain, what are you sitting there for? We need to get out of here immediately," Marty shouted calmly, when suddenly something happened that the guy never expected. Marco literally summoned a huge sword out of nowhere and became covered in an ominous red aura. "Marty, I trust you to evacuate ordinary people." "Trust me, I'll kill them all," our hero added, preparing for battle. After a couple of minutes, the earthquake stopped completely, and the streets were filled with incomprehensible speech. "The gates of hell have been opened. Streets where people were walking just minutes ago are now filled with goblins." At the sight of the monsters, chaos broke out in the streets. Marty, like any sane person, wanted to run away and called our hero with him. But Marco, despite all the pleas of his comrade, was unwavering. He simply stood and watched as the horde of goblins ran straight towards him, when suddenly he turned and said, "Marty, let's both survive this time." "Are you crazy, Marco? Let's run!" the boy screamed, horror on his face. At that moment, our hero, with a quick swing of his sword, cut several monsters in half at once, greatly surprising his friend. What surprised Marty most was that Marco wasn't scared, as if he knew it would happen. While cutting down the monsters one by one, our hero asked his friend to go get his daughter. Seeing the bewilderment on Marty's face, the man promised that he would answer all his questions a little later. The guy would still be horrified by everything that was happening and wouldn't know what to do, so he decided to trust his army friend and just follow all his orders. Marty ran to save Alice, leaving Marco alone against the horde of monsters. By this time, the city streets were already filled with human blood. No matter how much our hero wants to save everyone, he is not able to do so, even with the power of a prophet. The only thing he can do is kill as many monsters as possible and save the lives of his loved ones. When suddenly a huge green eye appeared in the sky, the same as the Lord of the Seven Snakes. This means that there is another phase ahead of him. And unlike Yoram, this demon had no intention of speaking. He was simply summoning an entire army of goblins. Marco knew that after receiving the title of prophet, the other phases would target him. Let's go back 3 days. After granting our hero powers, Yor introduced him to his new abilities. Marco can control life force. If he wants to save someone, he can do so at the cost of their souls. Such is the power of the prophet, bestowed by the Lord of the Snake family. But everything has its drawbacks, and after using these powers, our hero will be branded a hypocrite. The man who lived a quarter of a century in the apocalypse didn't give a damn about it. It was not without reason that Marco chose this cemetery as the first arena to fight monsters. Even before the regression, he came up with a plan. It's time to put it into action, activating the powers of the prophet, Lord of the Seven Serpents. Our hero began the process of reviving soldiers who had been peacefully lying in their graves for many years. In other words, with the help of Yoram, Marco gained the powers of a necromancer. In the conditions of the apocalypse, this is almost the most powerful ability imaginable. Our hero was going to create his own personal army. But there is a limit to everything. Now, the prophet's powers are not very developed and are not capable of resurrecting such a large number of people at once. However, thanks to the regressor skill Spirit Eye, Marco was able to remove the restriction and increase the level of his abilities. The resurrection process has begun. Now the question that interested me most was, how many warriors could he awaken? Due to the prophet's low level of ability, Marco could only resurrect 3. This was not quite the result he expected, however. There was no choice. The souls of the soldiers were called upon. Brothers, I'm sorry I disturbed your peace, but I and all of humanity need you. You will once again have to become a shield protecting people, Marco whispered, addressing the resurrected ones, after which the warriors bowed their knees as a sign of submission and readiness to fight for him. Meanwhile, the goblins unleashed a veritable havoc. In just a few minutes, they killed nearly 1,000 people. A couple of monsters followed Marty and Alice. The boy tried his best to fight them, but he couldn't kill them. But most of all, he was worried that Alice was sleeping all this time. He was afraid that she was wounded or something worse. And at the moment when it seemed that nothing could get worse, more monsters started falling from the sky. And the moment Marty got distracted, one of the goblins attacked him. Luckily, the resurrected warrior arrived in time, and the monster didn't have time to do anything. And our hero came with him. Seeing his friend's frightened eyes, Marco said, "I'll answer all your questions later, but now take this sword." Our hero decided to give his sword to Marty because he mastered the ancient martial art of kendo better than anyone else. After some events, the guy swore that he would never pick up a weapon again. But given the circumstances, he abandoned this rule. Taking the sword, Marty felt his entire body filled with energy, and he screamed loudly. Catching Marco's gaze, the guy awkwardly asked, "What is this sword called?" Meanwhile, a small group of people managed to escape from the goblins by climbing a high fence. In a panic, the adults left the little boy downstairs. Noticing this, the boy's mother wanted to jump down to save him, but she was quickly stopped and told that it was suicide. And it seemed like that was the end. The goblin was ready to cut off the poor boy's head, when suddenly something quickly flashed in front of the baby. It was Marty who cut the goblin into pieces, thereby saving the boy's life. The time gained was enough for the mother to come down and pick up her son. Our hero made the right decision by giving Marty his head. Marty handled him very skillfully. Besides, there was another reason for this. Marco didn't want to attract unnecessary attention to himself, so he wanted Marty to get the role of the hero. In his past life, he was the leader of a resistance group, the Warlike Guards. So he was perfect for this role, and Marco would guide him from the shadows. One professional swordsman and a squad of resurrected soldiers proved to be an insurmountable obstacle for the goblins. The monsters tried different attack tactics, but the result was always the same. They were dying. After a few minutes of intense fighting, Marty and the resurrected killed all the monsters in the area. Due to lack of practice for a long time, fighting with such a heavy sword left him very tired. Thinking that I could finally rest, a terrible howl was heard from beyond the horizon. Turning around and seeing his enemy, Marty froze in horror. But Marco had the opposite reaction. A smile appeared on his face. Our hero knew and waited for him to appear. He is the Goblin Destroyer. This monster can be considered a mini-boss of the first level. Its attacks are very primitive, but its axe is very dangerous. Despite its enormous size, the destroyer was quite fast, so action had to be taken with lightning speed. Marty barely managed to block his blow, and it was very difficult to do so. And no matter how hard the guy tried, the explosive power of the destroyer exceeded all his expectations. So even after blocking the blow, Marty flew back. Moreover, the force of the impact was so high that the wall the guy crashed into crumbled like a fragile cookie. The main mission of this monster was to find a suitable location to create a base. So, realizing that Marty was no longer a threat, the goblin simply turned around and left. All this time, Marco remained inactive. But after this attack, he approached his friend and asked, "Are you okay?" "It's fine, don't worry, but why didn't he kill me?" Marty answered. "He's not interested in you, he wants a memorial, the goblin's chosen spot for an offering to their leader. They intend to use the memorial tower as a personal base. If we don't get rid of them, they'll breed like cockroaches," our hero added thoughtfully. "Now it's clear they're not as idiots as they seem," Marty whispered in response. "Wait, how do you know that?" the guy asked in surprise. "This is already the second time for me," Marco answered. "I'm completely confused. What does a second time mean to you?" the guy added, even more perplexed. Exhaling, our hero whispered, "Live. And the goblins are just the beginning. Believe me, it will get worse and worse every day. But in order for us to have even the slightest chance, we must destroy their altar. And the most important thing is to destroy their leader." In the most serious voice imaginable, Marco added, "Thanks to our hero's knowledge, finding their lair was not difficult." However, Marty understood perfectly well that the two of them would not be able to destroy the entire lair. "Don't worry, there will be 5 of us," Marco said pompously, summoning the souls of the soldiers. For Marty, it was all like a bad dream, but there was simply no time to explain everything to him. In this whole operation, the most difficult thing was killing the goblin destroyer and the goblin leader. That's why our heroes decided to begin their invasion by killing the destroyer. Having quietly killed the guards and having gotten closer, Marco threw a dagger at the goblin. Thanks to the sudden attack, the blade hit the monster's right eye. But that was only the first step of the plan. The second step was to close the distance. Thanks to a well-aimed throw, the goblin's view narrowed. But at the same time, it made him more angry and unpredictable. Panicking, Destroyer began swinging his machete chaotically. The blows became more oblique, but at the same time more powerful. One wrong move and Marco could die. Going on the attack, the guy armed himself with scarlet wasp stings, which he successfully plunged into the body of the destroyer in the blind spot. By themselves, these stings cause minimal damage, but have strong side effects because they are saturated with poison. This poison won't kill such a giant, but it can paralyze it for a while. The men took advantage of this. When the destroyer became harmless, Marty went on the attack. According to their plan, the guy was supposed to cut off the goblin's head, but his strength was not enough. The sword only entered halfway into the monster's neck. Realizing that their attack had failed, Marty immediately retreated back. And during this short period of time, the destroyer's body was able to overcome the poison of the scarlet wasps. "Captain, I hit him with all my might, but it looks like his muscles are incredibly strong. We'll need your spikes again, otherwise we won't be able to get to him," Marty said, confused. "I know, but you'll only get one try. I don't have many," our hero whispered back. While our heroes were developing a new strategy, the destroyer went on the attack. Marty retreated to a safe distance, while Marco drew the monster's attention to himself. It will no longer be possible to get close enough to the monster to carry poisoned spikes again, so Marco decided to throw them from a distance, hoping that they would have enough penetrating force to penetrate the goblin's body. Fortunately, the power of the regressor and the prophet helped him with this, and in order for the poison to last a little longer, the man threw them into the heart area. It worked. The monster's heart spread poison throughout its body, causing it to collapse. Now it's Marty's time. The guy understood that he didn't have a single chance to make a mistake, and everything had to be decided in one blow. Having been caught in the cut from the previous blow, the guy finally cut off the destroyer's head, after which Marty compared the destroyer's bones to strong steel bars. Despite the small victory, it was impossible to let down our guard. After all, now the most difficult and important stage of their plan begins. The hunt for the leader. After examining the altar and killing the surviving goblins, Marco heard some noise. The goblin leader has a large arsenal of magical spells, so you need to treat everything with caution. When suddenly the sixth sense told our hero that the enemy was behind him. Turning around, he saw the leader gathering a clot of magic to kill Marty. Meanwhile, the unsuspecting guy happily asked, "Captain, did you find him?" At that moment, a bright flash flashed in front of his face. It was a resurrected warrior who barely managed to block the leader's attack and save Marty. However, the power of the spell was enough to destroy the resurrected warrior. Given the prophet's low level of ability, Marco knew that his warriors would not be strong enough. Now, only 2 spirits are available to him. Noticing the leader, Marty, casting aside all doubts, desperately rushed into battle. But to no avail. Activating a magical shield, the goblin blocked his sword. And then, using gravity magic, he threw the guy back. Even such a good swordsman as Marty has nothing to oppose to such a powerful magician. Having taken his head back from his shoulders, our hero said, "Although he seems strong, this barrier can be broken down. Let's break it with a little more force." To which Marty, perplexed, replied, "I see, but where will we get this power? There is one way, but you need to merge with the sword. Only then will you be able to break his magic shield," our hero replied in an inspired voice, handing the sword back to the guy. "Off with your head. This is not just a piece of iron, it is a cursed object, possessed by a spirit. If the owner manages to merge with the spirit, then the weapon's full potential can be revealed. The main thing is not to let go of the sword." Having listened to our hero, Marty began to try to merge with the sword into one. For an experienced swordsman, becoming one with his weapon was quite simple. Seeing how the guy was filled with energy, the goblin leader shouted something and laughed. At that moment, all the goblins around started running towards the altar. This incomprehensible cry was the call of the leader. Under the influence of his spell, ordinary goblins became stronger and lost any instinct for self-preservation. With wild eyes, the monsters went on the attack, and all they wanted was to kill our heroes. Seeing the goblin horde rapidly approaching, Marco was convinced that the monsters' abilities had not changed compared to their previous life. And fortunately, he had a special blade hidden away for such an occasion. The Demon Hunter's silver blade is a throwing weapon with low durability that breaks immediately after the first use. It generates a random death effect upon breaking. Based on the description of the blade, one can only hope for luck. After waiting for the goblins to come a little closer, Marco threw his dagger at one of them. Having pierced the monster's head, the blade began to crumble into pieces, and a bright glow appeared. And a moment later, all the goblins found themselves in a fiery trap. "Marty, I can't buy you any more time, so go for it," Marco whispered quietly. Meanwhile, the guy had almost finished merging with the executioner's soul, which was tied to the sword. Marty felt his entire body being filled with incredible strength and energy, while experiencing incredible pain. In the end, the synchronization was successful, and now the executioner's spirit is thirsty for blood. Connection with the spirit is a short-term enhancement that has saved our hero's life more than once in his past life. When suddenly Marty stopped screaming, and at that very second he went on the attack, leaving behind a terrifying magical trace. Against such an opponent, even the most powerful magician will have very little chance. However, everything has a price, and for merging with the spirit of the sword, the price is high. In this state, the leader's attacks posed absolutely no threat to the guy. He simply cut them with his sword. In this case, Marty is capable of killing the leader in a matter of seconds, or not. Although magical attacks do not cause any damage to the executioner, this does not apply to restraining spells. The Supreme Goblin simply sealed Marty in a giant crystal. This spell only slowed down the executioner for a while, but did not stop him. The executioner's unleashed power was so powerful that even the barrier didn't stand a chance. And in the end, everything came to a logical end. The sword pierced the fragile body of the magician. After the death of the leader, the guy was able to regain control and bring the spirit of the executioner back. With this, the goblin invasion was completely stopped, and it is worth considering that the phase was observing the entire battle. All this time, the resurrected soldiers searched for and finished off the hidden goblins. And despite this small victory, Marco knew that more trials lay ahead. As a reward, All survivors within a radius of 150 meters will receive some kind of common class item, and those who were within a radius of 50 meters will receive another reward of the usual class. However, those who made the greatest contribution to the victory will receive a special reward, regardless of the distance. In total, our heroes received 4 chests, 2 ordinary ones and 2 of a higher class. Seeing some boxes appear out of nowhere, Mark screamed in fear. "What is this? Are we in some kind of game?" "No, it's the apocalypse system. We'll get rewards for winning these kinds of missions," Marco replied with a smile. From the normal class chests, they received the goblin chieftain's necklace and his head. Also his magic bracelet, which contains a small part of the leader's magic. "And this bracelet is quite nice. Are you sure you don't need it?" Marty asked happily, putting on the artifact. "No, you need it more, and I'll look for something else," Marco replied, looking closely at one of the chests. Having unlocked another reward, the boys received the Goblin Lord's Heart. When consumed, it grants the ability to cast spells, but requires a predisposition to magic. In the conditions of the apocalypse, this item is incredibly valuable and useful. But there was a small problem. Neither Marco nor Marty were predisposed to magic. That's why our hero wanted to save his heart so that he could later sell it to someone at a high price or exchange it for something more suitable. But it's not that simple. This item can only be used by the recipient. At this point, the system offered the man to test his predisposition to magic. For Marco, this opportunity came as a real surprise, since it had never happened in his past life. Perhaps this is some special ability of the prophet. In any case, the chances of success are slim. Our hero spent 20 whole years in the apocalypse, and during all this time did not discover a single magical talent. And this time, the miracle did not happen. The system did not detect any magical potential in him. However, the search was successful, and she found the person who had it. Something happened that Marco could never have imagined. Alice was discovered to have a natural predisposition to magic, and besides, her potential was rated by the system as the highest level of legendary rank. This means that the little girl is actually an incredibly powerful magician. Who would have known that my little girl had such a hidden power? Besides, she is a legendary mage, and I have never met anyone like that. It's definitely surprising, but is Alice destined to get her hands bloody too? Marco whispered thoughtfully. Cap, you don't have to make her a mage, do you? Honestly, even we adults have a hard time fighting monsters. You always said yourself that you joined the army so that our children could live happy lives, Marty said, seeing the confusion on our hero's face. To be honest, the man didn't know what to do in this situation. And by this time it was over and the girl woke up. Opening her eyes and looking around, Alice cried out joyfully, "Oh, Uncle Marty, you're with us too!" "Of course I'm with you, and you've grown much taller since then. Do you want to play on the plane like we used to?" The guy answered with a sincere smile. "Thank you, of course, but no, I'm not a child anymore," the girl added, trying to sound grown up. Having fully awakened from her sleep, Alice noticed that they were in some strange place. Turning back, she froze in horror. She fell asleep in a warm and cozy bed and woke up on the battlefield of the apocalypse, when suddenly she said, "Dad, didn't we agree that we would go through all obstacles together no matter what?" "You told me the whole truth, so why?" "I feel a burden on my soul," Marco replied. "I'm sorry, but I had no other choice." While they were talking, someone came up to them and pulled their jacket. It was the crying boy that Marty saved. He tried to explain something through his tears, repeating the same words, after which he pointed his finger at the girl's body from which the goblin sword was sticking out and said, "Mom! Mom!" At that moment, he started crying even harder. Trying to somehow dull the little boy's pain, Alice leaned over and hugged him with all her strength. Seeing this picture, Marty whispered, "She's just like you, brave and kind." "No, she got it from her mother." "I'm not like them. I'm weak and afraid of everything," Marco answered, holding back tears. While comforting the boy, Alice suddenly turned to the men and asked them to take the boy with them. But her father was categorically against it. After all, a special shelter would soon open where the boy would receive help. However, the girl continued to insist on her own, saying that this boy had no one left. Despite Alice's best efforts to persuade her father, Marco was adamant. Realizing that she wouldn't be able to make her father change his mind, the girl used her most powerful weapon, tears. And then she whispered, "Being alone is the most terrible thing that can happen. I know because you abandoned me when Mom died." And just at that moment, a portal opened behind our hero, from which Yoram the Echidna appeared, shouting, "See? I told you so! You are a prophet who controls death, and you want to live in peace? Stupid! Why did you come here?" Our hero asked fearfully. "How come my prophet destroyed the goblin leader? They were supposed to build citadels to destroy this city. You've mixed up all the pieces on the board again," the Lord replied with a slight smile. Not understanding what was happening, Marco added, "What's the point of this conversation? Doesn't it benefit you when I'm active?" "Well, you're right about that. It works to my advantage. It's just that the others aren't so happy about the dead rising before the carnival starts," Yoram replied, smiling even more. "I don't care what they don't like. It's the power of the prophet," the man shouted irritably. "Well, don't be angry. They're right. They take effect while the pieces haven't been set up yet. Even though I enjoyed the fight, you acted against the rules. You called the soldiers for their sense of duty, didn't you?" the demon added, putting on a touching voice. "So what? They're just as dead as everyone else," our hero shouted indignantly. "I know. And here's the interesting part. I came to offer you a compromise. A life for a life. Once you've used the spirits, you'll have to pay for it. Everyone demands an equal exchange. But I can speak them for one soul. And you're lucky they didn't put forward any more conditions, so I'll take that child." "You don't need him anyway," Yoram added, pointing his finger at the boy standing next to Alice. Plus, the demon was going to kill the boy personally so that his prophet wouldn't be branded as a child killer. Marco was truly horrified by what he heard. His heart began to beat faster and his hands began to sweat. And Alice even started yelling at Yoram, threatening him with retribution. Unable to control herself, the girl ran up to the Lord and hit him right in the face with all her might. She was angry that someone imagined himself to be God and decided who would live and who would not. "You are definitely father and daughter, but you won't get off as easy as your dad." Yoram screamed angrily, attacking the girl with his magical snake, and he did it with full force, slamming the girl into the wall. The blow caused her multiple internal organ injuries, and she began coughing up blood. Everything happened so quickly that Marco didn't even have time to understand anything. While trying to save his daughter, the man came across another snake, Yoram. Seeing all this, Marty also did not stand aside and went on the attack, but he too suffered the same fate. Having captured all three of them, Yoram did not kill them. He only wanted to show them what he was capable of. When suddenly he looked at our hero and said, "Look, I like you, but if your spawn crosses the line, I will not tolerate it. But I can change my mind and take 2 lives instead of 1. What do you think? You people can't learn anything on your own. I will help you. You have a very simple choice. The life of this boy or the life of these 2. The choice is yours. I don't care who I kill," Yoram added, laughing. "Don't you dare! Don't touch them!" our hero shouted, filled with anger. At that moment, the goblin leader's heart accidentally fell out of the man's coat. The ringing sound of a falling crystal object fortunately went unnoticed, until it began to emit bright color and a piercing screech, after which the heart automatically transferred its power to Alice. Seeing this, Yoram shouted, "Finally! From now on, it will be more interesting." Hearing this, Marco realized that the Fays knew about his daughter's predisposition to magic and arranged this whole circus on purpose. Seeing the man's worried face, the girl screamed, "Dad, don't blame yourself. Everything is fine. Remember, we will get through everything together. Just believe in us." Having completely absorbed the leader's heart, Alice began the process of awakening magic. In the process, her left eye changed color to bright red and her right eye to bright blue. The system identified her as a mental mage. A few minutes later, the awakening process was complete. Immediately after this, Alice began to use her powers. Having accumulated a sufficient amount of energy, she screamed, "You are not God, and you have no right to play with other people's lives." After which, she released all the accumulated magical energy, creating a huge attack beam. So what the legendary magician is capable of is impressive. However, despite this destructive force, Yoram simply looked at this beam with a smile. The moment the attack hit the demon's body, something strange happened. He just absorbed all this energy into himself, after which he shouted with wild eyes, "The system deceived you! It is not a legendary magician, it is mythical! Marco, she's much more interesting and much stronger than you," Yoram added, releasing the hostages. And Alice still hadn't given up trying to stop the demon. Using such a powerful spell immediately after waking up greatly depleted her mana reserves. And when she tried to cast another spell, her heart simply stopped. For a mage, using up a large amount of mana can be fatal. Mental magic consumes a lot of energy, so watch it, Yoram said, approaching the girl. After looking at her for a while, he leaned over and extended his hand towards her, after which they both glowed with a bright blue light. Thinking that the phase was killing her, Marco shouted, "Don't touch her, take me! If you harm her in any way, I swear I will kill you," our hero added, trying to stop the demon. "Oh, relax, we're allies, you forgot. I'm helping her so she can recover faster," Yoram replied sarcastically. After a few seconds, Alice began to breathe again. "Now everything will be fine with her. She just needs to rest. You know, if I were you, I'd thank her." They were pleased with this turn of events, so we'll let you get away with it. But from now on, remember that she is now in even greater danger. They'll try to do everything possible to kill her, the demon added indifferently. "Wonderful. But as my patron, you're just going to sit and watch this?" our hero asked, holding back his anger. But Yoram did not answer. He only threw some kind of red ball at his feet. From his past life, Marco remembers that a similar item was a reward for clearing the goblin citadel. They were planning to hand him over after the carnival, but I intercepted him for you. Your patron isn't so bad in the end, tell me?" the demon said with a sly smile. As he was leaving, Yoram reminded our hero of their agreement and what would happen if he lost. If Marco somehow loses, then Alice will too. After 5 hours, the girl finally woke up. Opening her eyes, she screamed in fear. "What happened? I remember fighting that demon and—" "Alice, don't strain yourself so much. You overdid it a bit and passed out. And you don't have to worry about Patrick. Your dad took him to the shelter," Marty answered in a calm voice. Having learned that her father had acted in his own way, the girl grabbed him by the hair, demanding that he immediately turn the car around. But Marco didn't take the boy to the shelter for no reason. The shelter was run by military Colonel Derek, who had proven himself to be a very reliable person in his past life. Although Alice did not agree with her father's decision, she was still calm that Patrick was safe. "Listen, Dad, if the shelter is so safe, then where are we going?" the girl asked unexpectedly. They were heading to Seoul. After the first gates of hell close, new ones will break out in the city, the so-called dungeons. And to prevent the impending disaster, Marco needs rewards for these dungeons. When suddenly Marty said, "Captain, since we have time, I wanted to ask, do you see the future as a prophet chosen by God?" "You could say that," our hero answered thoughtfully. "I see. So what do we do next?" the boy added in a trembling voice. "Nothing too special, just getting stronger," Marco replied. Meanwhile, they were already approaching Seoul. Driving at night was dangerous, but if they wanted to make it before the gates opened, they had no other choice. Having driven even closer to the city, they picked up a local radio wave. They learned from a radio message that the city had completely ceased functioning, and that all the main roads into the city had been destroyed. While trying to come up with a new detour plan, Marty came across something strange. Something big and green fell straight out of the sky and crashed right into their windshield. Luckily, the car wasn't seriously damaged, but the impact caused it to spin around. Getting out of the car and seeing that a goblin had crashed into them, Marco was very surprised, because after the destruction of the leader, the monsters should have disappeared. At that moment, the man heard a characteristic laugh behind him, and a moment later, an arrow flew past his head centimeters away, and with such speed that the man didn't even understand where the shot came from. Only the highest archers are capable of such things. A young guy appeared from the shadows holding a sports bow in his hand, aiming at our hero. Seeing that there was a man standing in front of him, the boy quickly put away his bow and apologized. Looking around, Marco saw a dozen goblins with bullets in their heads. He then asked, "Is this your doing?" "Yes!" the guy screamed in fear. "And you shoot accurately. Even in complete darkness, you hit people right in the head," Marty said in surprise, getting out of the car. An ordinary guy who single-handedly, without a combat bow, killed so many monsters. It's strange that Marco hadn't heard of him in his past life. "What's your name?" the man asked. "I have a complicated name, but you can call me Ken," the boy answered shyly. Because of his abilities and shyness, Ken did not inspire much confidence. According to him, after the gates opened, he couldn't get in touch with his father, who was in a hospital in Seoul, so he went to see him and ran into monsters. After learning this, Marco understood why he hadn't heard anything about Ken in his past life. He had simply died. Realizing this, our hero said, "Boy, you better go back or you'll die." Bowing his head and holding back tears, Ken replied, "Please help me get to Seoul. I'm paying you." But that was a completely different conversation. After which Ken took a small crystal out of his pocket, and it was clear from his look that he didn't understand what it was. And Marty also wasn't satisfied with it as a form of payment, because he saw it as an ordinary purple stone. And only Marco knew the true value of this artifact. Taking the crystal in his hands and examining it, our hero whispered with delight, "There is no doubt, but it should not have appeared so early." In the end, our heroes took Ken with them in exchange for this crystal. Trying to understand what caused such a glitch, Marco asked the guy about his fight with the goblins. No matter how many times our hero asked, the guy always answered the same. This crystal fell from the goblin. In the apocalypse, such stones are incredibly rare and valuable, and this particular specimen is a rune of dexterity. There are two ways to gain the power to develop the gift, or improve static indicators using third-party artifacts. A gift is a special talent that is present from birth but lies dormant, while a statistical indicator is something that anyone can obtain if they work on developing it. Runes are unique items that can instantly boost these very same statistical stats. Naturally, runes are in high demand. However, the chances of dropping even one from a monster are minimal. Runes usually drop from high-ranking monsters, but there have been cases where they also drop from regular mobs. But this only happened a couple of times during the entire apocalypse. And at that moment, Marco thought, what if it wasn't just luck? To confirm his theory, the man asked Ken where he learned archery. "My father is a national archery champion. He taught me. He's currently bedridden because of an incident," the boy replied, sounding upset. Now everything fell into place. Ken is the son of the legendary Olympic champion, Peter Chong. In a past life, Peter Chong was a rune master. He possessed an exceptionally rare gift that was bestowed only on him and another girl, Anna Lian. Resistance groups around the world competed to recruit him, but Peter remained comatose for 7 years after the accident. Many tried to bring him back to normal. Saint Ira, one of the 8 battle stars, spent a great deal of money to craft a special healing elixir for him. However, contrary to her title, she is quite a spiteful and vengeful individual, and she ended up killing Peter for refusing to join their group. But this time, everything will be different, and Marco will do everything possible to avoid Peter's death. When they arrived at the station, Marty asked for a map so they could get to the hospital. But our hero said they needed to stop somewhere first. Hearing this, Ken shouted indignantly, "You promised to take me to my father! You even took a rune for it!" "Calm down. I will keep my promise. But before that, I need to take something." Given the situation, the country is conducting massive rescue operations, deploying all available resources, including the army and firefighters. And the hospital is well guarded. "So your father is safe, and we need to collect heads," Marco answered in a calm voice. "Heads? Why do we need heads?" Ken asked, puzzled. "To cure your father, we need an elixir that can be bought with monster heads," our hero added enthusiastically. It sounded tempting. The only problem was that the service cost a whole 400,000 heads. However, considering that our heroes are now going underground, this is not such a big problem. When suddenly Alice said, "My dad is living for the second time, so we should listen to him." Not believing the girl, Ken asked again, "The second time? Let's say this is all true. Where can we buy this elixir?" the guy asked apprehensively. "Don't worry, you'll find out everything soon," Marco answered with a smile. When suddenly the radio station abruptly stopped broadcasting and 4 5s appeared on the car screen. And at that very moment, right at the entrance to the city, a huge beam of light struck from the sky. The children and Marty were seriously frightened by this sight, and only our hero was happy about it. When the bright glow disappeared, a huge demon appeared from it. At the sight of Yaka, ordinary people froze in horror, realizing their uselessness. But instead of scattering human entrails all over the road, this monster started saying something. "From this moment on, the carnival begins. Based on the results, the phases will choose their prophets. Completely ignoring the demon's words, people began to shout something. Not wanting to listen to the senseless cries of people, the Yaksha shouted, "Be silent!" thereby creating one of his unique attacks, the Yaksha roar. Everything that came under the beam's influence turned into scorched earth, erasing everything in its path. Wiping his mouth, the demon added in a calm voice, "Don't you know that it's impolite to interrupt? All the necessary information will be automatically embedded into yours, so there is no point in going into details. However, I am obliged to tell you about all the rules." But then his fiery speech was interrupted by a loud car horn. Yaksha couldn't believe that someone had the courage to see what he saw. To attract the demon's attention, Marco got out of the car, and in a rude manner asked the demon to speak faster. "Captain, is this the Yaksha you were talking about? Does he look stronger than the goblins?" Marty whispered, leaning out of the car. Hearing this, the demon came closer to our heroes and, restraining his anger, said, "How dare you compare me to goblins?" When suddenly, Yaksha grabbed Marco by the shoulder, after which he whispered in his ear in a sweet voice, "Friend, I'm curing this. Please spare my dignity. There are too many onlookers here." "No problem. Get your bag, Hart," our hero replied indifferently. "That's not right. We haven't even signed a contract yet, and you're already demanding this," Kai replied nervously. "Okay, then give me the healing elixir," the man added in a commanding tone. "Are you crazy? It costs 400,000, the demon whispered, growing even more nervous. Noticing that Q's wounds had not yet fully healed, Marco gently hinted to him not to argue. Ken and Marty were shocked by how brazenly the hashish hero communicated with the demon. And even despite this, the archer still did not believe that Marco was living a second time. After a short conversation, the demon bowed and the man left. "I didn't manage to get a healing potion from Kuryu, but I did manage to get some useful things for survival. Now all that remains is to wait for the gates to the dungeons to open." After a few minutes, the first gate opened, and at that moment, knowledge about the carnival and everything that was happening was implanted into the heads of all people. When suddenly Ken screamed in fear, "Was everything he said really true? And that you're living a second life isn't nonsense?" "Of course it was true. Do I look like a person who lies?" Marty answered indignantly. "Don't be mad at him. He's just a scared kid. You should think about the car," Marco added. "What? You want us to drive into the dungeon by car?" Marty shouted in surprise. Of course, Marco didn't mean that. He wanted the guy to go to the Sinchon area, where the exit from the dungeon is located, and meet them there. But warned that soon in that area, a huge battle called the Time of Troubles would begin. You should have realized by now that the perversion spawns a fixed number of monsters. Even if you quickly close the gates, these monsters will still descend on the city, our hero added. "But that's not fair, is it? Even if we close all the gates, people will still die," Marty asked, puzzled. "Yes, that's why you're going there. You will not only take us out of the dungeon, but you will also protect the people in that area," Marco replied. For the guy, being assigned such a task meant that the captain trusted him completely, so he happily agreed to do it. But even if Marty makes it before the brother opens, civilian casualties are inevitable. However, the main reason Marco sent the boy to the Sencho was that this way they would be able to earn many more heads to buy the elixir, gain Peter's trust, and use his ability to find the best way out of the current situation. Having collected all the necessary things, Marco, Ken, and Alice went to the dungeon. In battle, Ken proved himself to be a professional archer and a good strategist, while Alice amazed with her magical abilities and courage. Watching the girl, the boy finally realized that the world he was used to no longer existed. After clearing one of the floors of the dungeon, Alice said, laughing, "Dad, why didn't you tell us that we would fight zombies?" "I don't understand the reason for her laughter," Ken asked in surprise. "Aren't you afraid of zombies?" "Come on, who's afraid of zombies these days? They're walking, ma'am, and in any game they're just mobs," Alice answered, collecting the loot. "I see, you're obviously a good player, but I've never been able to," Ken added sadly. "You wouldn't say so. You've got obvious talent. You just need to smash it," Alice added with a yawn. Noticing that the girl was no longer as active, our hero reminded her to be more careful with her abilities. Having reached the second floor of the dungeon, our heroes encountered the same zombies. Luckily, they have developed an effective plan to combat them, which allows them to reduce the time it takes to complete. Ken attacks first, firing several arrows at once. Seeing that all the arrows hit the head, Marco asked in surprise, "Have you decided to follow in your father's footsteps and become a professional athlete? If only I'd suddenly become a good archer when the apocalypse started. It was like I could see the target much closer," the guy replied, upset. Our hero found this strange, because he believed that his talent lay in the falling out of runes, like his father. But unexpected accuracy is not everything. The guy constantly feels some changes, when suddenly their conversation was interrupted by Alice, who was pointing at something in surprise. She saw a chest with a reward at the end of the corridor. Without sparing her strength, she completely cleared the entire floor with one spell and headed towards him. At that moment, Marco screamed in fear, "Alice, stop!" But due to the characteristic sound of her spells, the girl did not hear him and continued to run forward rapidly. The man didn't just ask his daughter to stop for no reason, because in a past life, this dungeon had a deadly trap that would activate when you tried to open the chest. Trying to somehow avoid this, our hero ordered Ken to shoot at the chest. The distance was about 100 meters, and Alice's spell distorted space, so it was very difficult to aim. However, the guy was able to do this at the moment when the girl almost touched the chest. A second later, a powerful explosion thundered. Imagining the worst possible outcome, Marco screamed in horror. But when the flame disappeared, a silhouette appeared in the smoke, which meant that everything was fine with Alice. The only thing that was damaged was her hair and clothes. Running closer, the man began to examine his daughter for any other wounds. After making sure she was okay, Marco said in a trembling voice, "It's a dungeon trap. Thank Ken that his arrow hit you before you could open it. Otherwise you would have died." "Thank you, Ken," Alice whispered guiltily. And yet the chest contained some kind of reward in the form of a golden key. This is the key to the final room of this dungeon, where they will meet the boss. The explosion was intended to kill, or at least severely injure the runners before the fight with the main monster. Compared to my previous life, there were no changes in this dungeon. And this means that the final boss will be the king of ghouls. Meanwhile, Marty was stuck in a traffic jam in the city center, when suddenly an announcement sounded in the city about the invasion of monsters, and all the people rushed to shelter. And that means Marty is late. However, to his luck, the gate opened very close by. And we return again to Marco and the children who opened the boss's room. As they expected, the Ghoul King surrounded himself with a guard of elite zombies. Let's say it didn't come as a surprise to our hero. He knew it would be exactly like this. He also told the children that until they dealt with the guards, the king would not receive any damage. But the biggest problem is that the boss can resurrect his guards, which means they all need to be killed at the same time. And knowing about this feature, Marco took something suitable from Kuryu, the cleaver of Paladin Raoul. With its help, they will be able to slow down the process of zombie resurrection. But this does not mean that they will be able to slow down the resurrection of all zombies at the same time. Meanwhile, the streets of Seoul turned into hell. The first line of defense was broken through. The military is trying with all its might to hold back the onslaught of the monsters, but the fall of the second line of defense is only a matter of time. Realizing that the situation was critical, the general in charge of defense requested air support. He was sure that only bombing could stop the monsters. Besides, this is the perfect chance to destroy all the monsters at once, before they have time to break through all the lines of defense. But despite all the requests, the top leadership refused to bomb the area, fearing condemnation in the media. In other words, they decided to sacrifice ordinary soldiers, hoping that they would do their duty. In the midst of the battle, the general was informed that a civilian vehicle was approaching their headquarters. Thinking that it was some madman, the general ordered the car to be turned around immediately. But it was too late. The car was breaking through crowds of monsters, knocking down goblins along the way. As you may have already understood, Marty was driving this car. Meanwhile, Marco and the children have already started their fight. To minimize the chance of losses, our hero called upon fallen soldiers. Alice was the first to attack. With her spell, she was able to seriously injure several elite zombies. And even despite their wounds, the monsters went on the attack, and they chose the most vulnerable one as their first victim. But Ken is not one of those who will just get scared and give up. Dodging the blow at the zombie, he began to shoot. Thanks to his accuracy, he managed to kill one of the guards by splitting his head with an arrow. Marco also did not stand aside and sent the resurrected to attack. With a combined attack, they cut off the zombie's legs. And why did the monster fall motionless to the floor? After which our hero used Paladin Raoul's column on him, slowing down the healing. The Coulomb's effect will last for several minutes, during which time they need to deal with the remaining guards. Despite their little combat experience, Cam and Alice worked together very well and began to combine their attacks. And Marco focused on the Paladin pendant, since its use requires a lot of life energy. The funniest thing is that all this time the King of Ghouls just sat on his throne and watched. But after losing the second guard, he suddenly started saying something while pointing his finger. To Ken and Marco, his words were nothing more than incoherent mutterings. But Alice understood him perfectly well. The King of the Ghouls ordered his guards to return to life. Our hero didn't know that there were people who could understand the speech of monsters. Perhaps this is one of the advantages of being an epic mage. However, Marco had another theory. According to it, Alice gained her powers by fusing with her mother's soul, though this was just a theory anyway. When suddenly the man said, "Daughter, if anything is upside down, what is he saying?" After the order of the King of Ghouls, the elite zombies began to actively regenerate, completely ignoring the effect of the Paladin's pendant. And this is a huge problem. And the problem is not even that they failed to implement the plan the first time, but that now their plan is useless. In addition, after healing, the elite zombies became much faster and stronger and focused on Marco. The man quickly realized that their chances of success were rapidly approaching zero. Luckily, he had a backup plan that he had come up with in his past life but never implemented. Being completely surrounded, our hero asked Alice to charge this pendant with her magic. The main part of this artifact was made from a magical mirror, and Marco wanted to redirect Alice's volley and destroy all the guards with one blow. It was necessary to act without delay, but the girl couldn't get her bearings quickly, which is why our hero got hit pretty hard. And now everything became even more complicated. In order not to be killed, he fought together with the resurrected soldiers. Because of this, Alice couldn't aim properly. She was afraid that she would accidentally hit her father. And then Ken came to her aid. The guy shot 2 guards in the head with one shot, thereby buying enough time for Marco to stand still and Alice to take aim. But Ken only neutralized 2 guards, while our hero was attacked by 3. And that same surviving zombie knocked the pendant out of the man's hands, causing the magic mirror to break, and along with it, all chances of victory. In addition to this, the guards killed our hero's resurrected soldiers. After which the King of the Ghouls began to laugh loudly and say something. And Alice at that moment was frozen with fear and whispered, "We are finished." And let's be honest, it all looked exactly like that. Marco, without the amulet and his soldiers, was surrounded. And if he died, the children wouldn't be able to do anything without him. Falling on one knee, he collected the large mirror shards. And with a creepy smile on his face, he shouted, "No! We're just getting started!" At that moment, all the surviving guards, on the orders of their king, attacked the man. And even with death approaching, he remained calm, tucking the shards between his fingers like throwing knives. Waiting for the right moment, he threw them at the zombies so that they became stuck in their dead bodies. Even though the pendant was broken, the mirror retained some of its power. So a couple of zombies were out for a while, and Marco grabbed their third friend by the head with his bare hand and desperately shouted, "Alice, now!" This time, the girl created a spell without hesitation and directed it towards the guards. Having killed them all at once, their victory now doesn't seem so impossible. And the Ghoul King's desperate cry was proof of that. Now it's time to take on the boss. But then, out of nowhere, another zombie appeared, whom our heroes already thought was dead. Luckily, the cooldown of fallen soldiers has already passed, so this is not a problem. With one precise blow of his sword, the resurrected one decapitated the king's last guard. After which the boss started shouting something again. But his dying speech was quickly interrupted by a sword piercing his forehead. And at this point, this dungeon can be considered completed. However, Marco forgot that during the carnival, one cannot let down one's guard for a second. After the death of the Ghoul King, his ribs tore through the skin and burst out. It was the boss's dying trap that our hero fell for. One of the monster's ribs pierced the man's heart. Seeing this, Alice was afraid that this was the end. Meanwhile, Marty finally arrived at military headquarters. Luckily for him, his former comrade in arms, Sam, was at the checkpoint. When the soldier asked what he was doing here, the guy replied, "Isn't it clear that I'm a hero who appears at the right moment? By the way, the captain should be showing up soon too," Marty added as he got out of the car. "Wait, Captain Marco? Are you with him?" Sam asked worriedly. "Yes, we're working together and we have to hold this position until he shows up," the guy shouted enthusiastically. "I'm glad you're with us now, but you know the rules. I can't give you a weapon," Sam whispered awkwardly. "Then it's good that I took him with me," the guy added joyfully, taking his head off his shoulders. Of course, for an ordinary soldier, the appearance of a ball out of thin air looked like magic. Noticing Sam's frightened look, Marty added, "You know about the gate and Yaks, right?" "Well, yes, we all know about that," the soldier replied fearfully. "So your new M4s aren't going to cut it during the carnival. Only such a weapon will be effective against monsters," Marty added, handing the ogre tonfa to the guy. The ogre tonfa is a melee weapon crafted from ogre bones. It possesses no unique properties other than increased durability. It can pierce monsters' heads with a single blow if the user possesses high physical strength. Marty acquired them as a backup weapon in case something happened to the sword. But he simply couldn't leave his former comrades without suitable weapons, so he gave them to Sam. Fighting together is always easier, especially if your opponent outnumbers you. Meanwhile, the situation in the dungeon has worsened considerably. Using Marco's blood as a source of power, the Ghoul King was resurrected and went on the attack. Trying to somehow help her father, Alice wanted to intervene in the fight, but Ken quickly stopped her. "Listen, you're practically out of mana after that attack, and besides, I can help him myself," the guy whispered, his eyes glowing golden. Ken activated his unique skill that appeared after the start of the apocalypse. Vision! And just a second later, he shot the King of Ghouls straight in the chest, and without time in the boss for some time. Our hero couldn't believe his eyes when he saw this. Ken had missed. It was obvious to him that his weak spot was his head, but the surprises didn't end there. After a well-aimed shot, Ken asked Alice to attack the king's hands. Don't think for a second the girl created a spell and attacked the hands of the Ghoul King as the guy ordered. Seeing the kids attacking the boss anywhere but his head, Marco began to think that something had happened to them, when suddenly Ken shouted, "Let's continue! Hit anywhere but not in the head!" Not understanding what the guy was trying to achieve, Alice decided to trust him completely and continue attacking. But this time the attack failed. The boss somehow managed to block both of her spells, what made the girl panic because she didn't even imagine that this was possible. Sensing her as the greatest threat, the Ghoul King decided to eliminate her first. But at that moment, Ken fired another arrow. And again, a shot straight into the chest, this time tearing it apart completely, after which the boss collapsed to the ground without showing any signs of life. And a moment later, his body began to evaporate. Coming closer to the remains of the monster, Marco said, "Killed him with regular arrows. Interesting. Ken, is there anything you want to tell me?" Our hero asked, looking at the guy. "How can I explain it? I saw shining spots on his body. Hitting them consecutively and killing the monster will yield runes as a reward. I acquired this ability after the apocalypse began. I call it Vision, but it doesn't work on all monsters," the guy replied guiltily. Having learned of the boy's ability, Marco found it even more interesting than he had originally thought, since in his past life, killing the Ghoul King was not rewarded with runes. Given Ken's excellent shooting skills and his talent for rune mining, he will be quite useful. And if you combine the boy's talent and the talent of his father, then our hero will be able to collect a whole arsenal of runes. While they were talking, the main reward for completing this dungeon appeared. This time it wasn't a trick, but there really was a chest with a reward, which they successfully opened. Upon seeing the contents, a wild smile appeared on Marco's face. It was a jackpot. First, they got all the Ghoul King's silver, which amounted to 1,500 heads. But that's not all. They also got his gold, which was worth 15,000 heads. Although by the standards of the apocalypse it wasn't much, now it felt like a fortune. Ken received the Ghoul King's aura gloves, a magical artifact that can be traded with other reward recipients. Their peculiarity is that they enhance concentration, but at the same time they have a terrible, cadaverous smell. Seeing the boy's disappointed look, Marco added, "Concentration isn't just about attack accuracy. It helps with everything, from creating magical items to using magic. And you can fight the smell, don't worry." Trusting the man, Ken did them, and at that very second, he vomited. Laughing, our hero added, "This smell will disappear in 3 years. And this is just the beginning. The main reward will come later." In addition to gold, silver, and gloves, this chest also contained the golden keys of the Ghoul King, along with a map. These keys can be used to open the boss's treasury. There were 3 keys in total, 1 for each team member. There was a problem to get to the king's treasury. It was necessary to go through another dungeon, but the biggest problem is that after entering this dungeon, they will split up, and it will be everyone for themselves. It is unknown what exactly will await them in this dungeon. It is unlikely to be an easy walk. Before the start, someone asked Marco for some advice. But the man had not gone through this dungeon in his past life. The only thing he knew was that the person who completed this dungeon received the Kundal Crown, an item for necromancers. Ken found it strange that while experiencing the apocalypse for the second time, the man didn't know all the nuances. Be that as it may, all 3 of them decided to enter this dungeon. As Marco predicted, they split up. The king's treasury was striking in its size, as it was many times larger than the Yoroma treasury. After looking around, the man didn't spot a single monster, so they just needed to choose the door with the desired reward. Approaching one of the doors, he saw a sign with the name of the item hidden behind it. Of course, it was good that they weren't choosing blindly, but it would have been nice if there had been at least some description of these names. However, some items were familiar to him from his past life. For example, the spiked Mornu blade, an ideal weapon for stealth assassinations used by assassins. Floor after floor, the man walked in search of something worthwhile. And in the end, he found what he was looking for. In a past life, this artifact was a one-of-a-kind and caused a lot of trouble for the demons. And its original owner died just a few months after the carnival began, so no one knew its true origin. The relic in question is the Book of Balance. Without thinking twice, Marco opened this door. Inside, a creepy room with a gloomy altar in the middle awaited him, on which stood that very Book of Balance. This artifact is designed for the exchange of items. By that time, Ken and Alice had already chosen their rewards and were waiting for our hero to return. After a few minutes of waiting, he finally appeared. Seeing the children's new artifacts, Marco asked, "Did you choose good items?" "The description was a bit vague, but I think so," the girl answered happily, holding out her hand to her dad and showing him the bracelet. She chose the Lake Fairy bracelet, and with her abilities, it's a good choice. And Ken, unlike Alice, decided to go a different way. He took some kind of magic sword instead of a bow. And when our hero asked him about it, the guy didn't answer that this sword had a cool name, so he chose it. "I agree he looks impressive, but do you know how to handle a sword?" Marco asked excitedly. "No, but he's cool," Ken replied. Meanwhile, a real massacre began on the city streets. The monster broke through 2 lines of defense, and only Marty and Sam held them back. Together, they have already killed more than 100 monsters, and they had no intention of stopping there. The only thing that worried Sam a little was that no matter how much they fought, the number of monsters did not decrease. Seeing that partner was starting to panic, Marty began to boost his morale by telling him stories from their shared service. And this could have worked if the terrible howling of thousands of goblins had not begun to be heard from the underground passage. The guys understood perfectly well that with their level of strength, they would not be able to defeat such a number. Moreover, the regular troops were running out of strength, and most of the personnel were seriously wounded. Sam, like a true military man, began to think strategically and suggested retreating. But Marty was guided by emotions and was ready to fight on. At some point, the guy felt something was wrong. Turning around, he saw a poisoned goblin dagger flying towards his friend. Without a second's hesitation, Marty pushed Sam away and took the blow himself. And at that very second, his whole body became paralyzed. I began to act immediately, and even in this state, he refused to retreat, saying that he must hold this line until the captain arrived. "Stop being a hero. We don't know what this poison is made of. We can't let it spread throughout your body," Sam shouted, trying to convince his partner. "You don't understand. If we leave now, the goblins will get into the city and cause a massacre. You remember our oath, right? "We must continue to fight," he whispered in Marty's ear, grabbing her hand. Such dedication shattered all Sam's notions of true willpower. And at that very moment, the realization came to him that now he was the only person on whom everything depended. So he decided to fight alone and hold back the goblins even at the cost of his own life. Let's see where this choice leads him. After some time, above is a news release with a very interesting report. Some guy witnessed two ordinary guys fighting goblins with almost bare hands. And considering that all people were indoctrinated with information about the carnival, Sam and Marty had already been dubbed prophets. And all because some British politician said that prophets would come to Earth and save the world. However, an eyewitness to their battle thought differently. He believed that the guys were not prophets, but destroyers. And let's be honest, he had every reason to think so. Meanwhile, the goblins reached the third line of defense and began to break through. No matter how hard Sam tried, he alone simply wasn't enough to fight off the monster's attacks. However, possessing a rather remarkable intellect, he was able to correctly set priorities and take advantageous positions. But at the moment when he came to help the soldiers hold the line, a giant goblin over 2 meters tall appeared. Seeing him, Marty shouted, "Sam, be careful! He is not only stronger than the others, but also much faster and smarter." Remembering the fight with the goblin destroyer, the guy understood perfectly well that his partner couldn't handle it alone. At least because he doesn't have enough experience in fighting against such monsters. And at most because Goblin is half a meter taller than him. Without further ado, the giant launched an attack. Sam barely had time to put up a block. Fortunately, his weapons and increased durability. But at the same time, he could see that a few more such blows and they would break. So having waited for the right moment, he went on the counterattack. And unlike the guy, the monster didn't have time to block. And what's more, he flew back. When suddenly the giant shouted in human language, "How can you be so strong?" I think now is a good time to get to know Sam better. Junior Lieutenant Sam Paxi of the Korean Army, call sign, Ogre. He was naturally able to control his breathing. Using this ability, Sam could minimize the blood flow to his brain. This was done to conserve the oxygen used by the brain. The adult human brain absorbs approximately 20% of the oxygen entering the body. In other words, the average rate of oxygen used is 600 milliliters per minute. In general, he uses oxygen-rich blood not for brain function, but to strengthen his muscles. Even during their time together, Marty called it ogre mode. Despite all his doubts, Sam was able to take down the big guy. All that remained was for him to deliver the finishing blow. But at that moment, the giant was saved by an ordinary goblin who plunged a dagger into the guy's back. Luckily, the blow wasn't strong and didn't cause much harm to Sam. And for his insolence, this goblin quickly paid with his head. And here's an interesting point. The monster that saved the giant was his wife. And by killing her, the guy forced him to enter total destruction mode. In this mode, the monster significantly increases all of its characteristics, which is why Sam didn't have time to react to his blow. Filled with anger, the giant began a series of deadly blows. He jumped with all his might straight at the guy, breaking the asphalt underneath him. As a result, Sam broke several ribs and suffered multiple internal organ damage. The ogre mode has only one drawback. Due to the limited blood supply to the brain, it cannot be used in combat. People typically die within seconds of the cessation of blood flow to the brain. Because ogre mode doesn't completely block blood flow to the brain, it can survive for just over 5 minutes. But this is still not enough. At that moment, a loud roar of an engine and the screeching of tires were heard in the distance. Seeing that he himself was in trouble, Marty decided to take matters into his own hands and hit the giant with his car. Crashing into the monster at great speed, he pinned it right against the wall, after which the guy ran out of the car trying to help his friend. Suddenly, a powerful explosion thundered. Due to the severe damage, the car caught fire and detonated. By some miracle, the giant survived the impact and explosion. As he approached, the boys saw tears on his cheeks. However, Sam didn't attach much importance to this. Gathering his remaining strength into a fist, the guy stood up from the earth and shouted with all his might, "Since you miss your wife so much, I will send you to her." There are 7 seconds left until the end of ogre mode. And during this time, Sam must manage to finish off the giant. Otherwise, he will simply tear them into small pieces. There's 1 second left in ogre mode, and the guy delivers the finishing blow. And yes, That was enough! The giant goblin was slain! But Sam himself was also badly hurt. However, he survived. But for how long? This fight took all the guys' strength, so much so that they couldn't move. And a new batch of goblins is already on the way, and there is no one to help them. Feeling death approaching inevitably, Marty whispered with a smile on his face, "It's true what they say. Heroes die." The guy closed his eyes, preparing to meet his fate. And a second later, a crystalline sound was heard, and all the goblins found themselves in ice traps. A voice came from afar. "Good job, Marty, and long time no see, Sam. Leave them to me, you've earned a rest," Marco said pompously, throwing his sword over his shoulder. It turns out that Ken took more than just a cool sword from the king's tomb, and a sword called Prince of Winter, which is capable of freezing opponents. To put it simply, finishing off ordinary goblins is not difficult for our hero. With a joint effort, they finished in just a couple of minutes. When it was all over, Marty asked our hero, "How did you get here without a car?" And in response, Marco only looked thoughtfully at the underground exit from the metro station. "Just don't tell me you came out of the station with a sink. This place was the source of all the goblins," Marty added in surprise. Smiling, the man replied, "I know, we killed them all." "Well, of course, what did I expect from the best captain in the world?" Marty replied with a smile. Now that the dungeon is cleared and the goblin invasion has been stopped, it's time to visit Ken's father. There was just one problem. After all, they still didn't have enough heads to buy the healing elixir. And when Ken pointed this out, Marco replied, "I never said we'd earn 400,000 heads in the dungeon." But then Alice interrupted their conversation and asked what reward he had chosen. Taking out a book, the man tries to hold back a smile and answers, "This is it." After reading its description, Marty and Alice considered it useless, since it does not guarantee the drop of anything useful. Taking out the broken paladin pendant, Marco said, "Now we'll test what she's capable of. For everything to work, you need to put the object directly into the book, after which it will do everything itself." Having absorbed the pendant, the book began to emit a large amount of light while making a terrible sound. When the transformation was complete, no new items appeared, but the relic improved itself. Its ability is now more predictable. The book exchanges one rare item for an item of the same type, but of a higher rarity. The potential rank of the resulting items ranges from magical to epic. The highest rank item they have now is "Off with your head!" Without thinking twice, Marco took the sword from Marty and placed it in the balance book. This time, the glow was of a pleasant golden color, and the sound it produced was like a melody. As a result, they received the Sword of the Repentant Titan, epic rank. This is a brand new blade forged by an executioner from titanium. When blood touches the blade, it receives special enhancements. Now don't hold this sword. And because of its epic rank, it can choose its owner on its own. If the fusion is successful, its owner will have a small chance of gaining control over the defeated monster. With such abilities, this sword is absolutely not suitable for Marty, but it is suitable for Marco. The guy was, of course, glad that such a powerful sword appeared in their arsenal, but now he was left without his weapon. But our hero wasn't going to leave the guy without a sword. He gave him the King of Winters. Handing the blade to Marty, Marco the Echidna said, "Take care of it. Ken chose this sword very carefully, and not because of its cool look or name, since he doesn't understand anything about swords." But Ken didn't care about this joke at all. He was more interested in the elixir. "Don't worry, I killed all the goblins and got the status of the goblin ruler. Thanks to this, I got access to their storage. And from there, I took out 500,000 heads. That's more than enough to buy the elixir," Marco said, holding out the bag. Ken felt ashamed that he had accused the man of not keeping his promises, and then this happened. Now that all the issues had been resolved, our hero asked Sam and Marty to speak at a press conference. This was necessary so that other prophets would not find out about him. So the general plan was as follows. The guys had to pretend to be prophets and give an interview, that's all. Not fully understanding Marco's true intentions, Marty happily agreed to fulfill his request. After all, Marco is the only person who knows everything in advance and whom he trusts 100%. For our hero, staying in the shadows as long as possible is simply necessary. As planned, they went to the hospital, but everything around resembled a set from a horror movie. There were traces of blood and scattered body parts everywhere. Seeing this whole nightmare, Ken was overcome with panic and fear. I hope his father is okay. The boy ran as fast as he could to the intensive care unit, when suddenly Marco heard a cry for help. But Ken and Alice didn't hear him, so they ran on quickly. Turning the corner, the man saw a girl sitting on the floor. Coming closer, our hero did not see any scratches or cuts on her. Trying to understand at least something, Marco asked her about what happened here. With a trembling voice, the girl whispered, "Some people. They came here, started killing everyone in a row, monsters and people, and then took it into their heads." During those long years of solitude, our hero had already forgotten how bloodthirsty people can be. According to the girl, she managed to survive only because she was able to hide. Trying to help her get up, Marco extended his hand. He grabbed her with all his strength and pulled her towards himself so that her face was right in front of his. Meanwhile, Ken and Alice were still running towards Peter's room. At some point, the girl heard a strange noise behind her. Turning around, the boys saw that the man had disappeared and the noise had stopped. When suddenly the guy said, "This is Uncle Marco's second life." Apparently, he remembered something and turned. "Please, let's check my dad first." Realizing that Ken would stop at nothing, Alice decided to continue on with him, as getting separated in an unknown place was dangerous. Let's return to our hero. The girl he found had a small ring with a spike. Seeing it, Marco asked with a sly smile, "If my memory serves me right, this is a Shakan's needle, right?" The jackal's needle is a hidden weapon laced with poison, designed to kill people. Considering that this girl was the only one who survived, it can be assumed that she killed everyone. When suddenly she pulled out a small dagger from somewhere and tried to cut our hero's throat. But the attack was quite weak, so Marco was able to easily dodge it. "How did you realize I deceived you?" the stranger asked suspiciously. "Thanks to Aru's infidelity, which I will receive in the dungeon," our hero replied. "Wow, they're already starting to appear." According to the Yaksha, runes are unusual objects. "It's such a shame they ended up with you because you're my type." "I'm sorry, but I'll have to trim you down a bit," the girl whispered, her eyes wild. For our hero, her threats sounded funny, so he gave her one last chance to just leave. "Thank you for such generosity, but it seems you don't understand. I'm the predator here." "And you are my prey!" the girl screamed loudly, attacking the man with a knife. But just like last time, Marco read her attack and dodged it with ease. The girl tried to appear threatening, but she clearly lacked combat experience and variety in her arsenal. For a man, she is nothing more than an absurd nuisance. Having repelled her attack, our hero simply threw her aside. "You're stronger than I thought, but why do you just dodge? It's so boring," the stranger added, landing like a ninja. Let's be honest. For Marco, killing her would only take a few seconds, but he can't forget about his public image. Even if she's a disgusting person, killing her would attract unnecessary attention. But leaving her actions unpunished would also be wrong. After making sure that there was no one nearby, our hero summoned the Titan sword. "It's impossible. To get such a weapon, you need to kill an entire army of goblins," the stranger cried out in surprise. "You're lucky you'll be the first one I kill with it," our hero whispered, going on the attack. Trying to somehow save herself, the girl began to run, but Marco was much faster. With the first blow, the man cut the girl's dagger in half. In a world where the apocalypse had come, Scarlet was like a newborn lion cub, with an innate talent that would allow her to become the king of the beasts. Usually, a newborn lion cub, like any predator, is full of curiosity, in particular, sporting interest, experiencing the thrill of pursuing different species. It's as if he's tasting his own strength. Everything changes the moment he encounters it. The feeling that overwhelms him at such a moment is not at all like curiosity. This is a primal fear, stronger in front of the opponent. A previously unknown feeling that dulls even primitive instincts. A power beyond understanding and authority. And the lion cub, who until this moment had been frolicking boldly on the hunting grounds, freezes in place from the overwhelming absolute force. After seeing what happened to her dagger, Scarlet realized she couldn't win this fight. "I'm trying to escape from death," the girl tripped. And for her, it was the end. Marco only needed to swing his sword once, and that would be the end of it. But will he do so? After all, by killing her, he will get nothing. And killing people without any apparent benefit or reason seems like madness even during the carnival. Resigned to the thought that she was a corpse, Scarlet closed her eyes and began to cry. When suddenly a sweet childish cry was heard. "Daddy?" and Alice peeked out from around the corner, catching him just a moment before the murder. Not wanting his daughter to see him kill a man, Marco froze. At that moment, Ken ran out from around the corner and shouted joyfully, "Uncle, we found Dad, but we don't have the elixir." But seeing what was happening, the guy, like Alice, froze in horror. And we will go back 10 years ago. The apocalypse has already happened 15 years ago. Besides our hero, there was another man alive who made Marco promise that he would not kill people if he returned. Clark saw Marco as the savior of humanity, so he didn't want such a man getting his hands dirty. And this promise was not just empty words for him. Realizing that he had almost made a terrible mistake, the man replied, "This woman killed all the people for the sake of heads. I only wanted to scare her." Surprisingly, Alice believed his words. Not wanting the children to witness the murder of people, Marco let Scarlet go, but warned that if something like this happened again, he would kill her. The girl swore that she would never kill anyone again, but she couldn't leave. Her ankle was broken. When everything was decided, the children went to Peter's room again, and Marco with them. But before leaving, the man asked the girl's name. "I'm Scarlet," the girl whispered fearfully, after which the man simply left. Despite all the horror that happened in the hospital, Peter was safe and sound. Apparently, Scarlet didn't have the courage to kill a man in a coma. After removing the respirator mask, Marco began pouring the elixir into the man's mouth. And at that moment, Peter finally came to consciousness. And we move on to the English Emergency Response and Management Center. News reached the British that 2 prophets had appeared in Korea. And to be honest, I didn't really like that either because they didn't rule out conflicts between countries. Even though the carnival had only just begun, they understood perfectly well that in the future, those who had more profits in their hands would rule. But profits also appear in England. And then the next question arises. How to get the same weapons as the Koreans? When suddenly a man named Alec pulled out the holy blade. Alec is England's first prophet. Now they are faced with a difficult choice. What should they do? And what should they do next? The best option in the current situation was to simply wait for the right moment to implement their plans. However, Alex suffered from lion-like pride, so he could not come to terms with the fact that a savior had appeared in Korea. The guy's friends persuaded him to try to negotiate with the Korean prophets, but he warned them that if he failed, he would kill them. And with that, we return to our heroes. After bringing Peter back to life, Marco, Marty, and Alice wanted to return home to spend the night. But they found ruins where the house had been. Marty assumed it was the work of goblins. However, our hero noticed how Kuryu was scolding another yaksha. Apparently, this demon hit me at those coordinates. The carnival is in full swing now, which means that yakshas have started appearing all over the world and causing chaos. Luckily, Marco is very prudent, so he prepared a backup shelter in advance, just in case something like this happens. On the way to this shelter, Marty had a question. When did our hero manage to prepare it? After all, the man returned from the apocalypse just a few days ago. And here, everything is very simple. Marco is a former military man, and he knew the location of all the government bunkers, including those long abandoned. Knowing that in the general chaos everyone would forget about him, the man stocked up on provisions in advance so that he could survive here. However, this bunker is still not safe enough, and our hero decided to fix this with the help of the artifact that Yoram gave him. Goblin Citadel. Crystal Core. Creates a cave-like shelter which can be upgraded by increasing its level. In other words, it can be used to create the perfect base. After using the crystal core, the gloomy and damp shelter gained comfort. It can't be called safer, but at least it's nice to be here. But security can be improved by raising the citadel level. Alice, however, was not particularly happy with these changes. Noticing this, Marco said with complete confidence in his voice, "Don't worry. Soon we'll be able to turn this cave into a real fortress." These words encouraged Marty, but the girl was still unhappy. When suddenly a message arrived on our hero's phone. "You'll see him," he whispered joyfully. "Alec has taken action. It's time to put the plan into action." Meanwhile, Alec and his team were already halfway to Korea. Along the way, the boys thought over all the possible plans for how events would develop, when suddenly the guy's phone rang, and the incoming call was from an unknown number. Thinking it was Marty, the prophet from Korea, calling, the boy answered. "Hello?" Alec said in a quiet but confident voice. "The Mist Ranger's prophet is watching you. Be careful," came the voice from the phone. Considering this a threat, Alex screamed loudly, after which the telephone conversation ended. The Mist Ranger is a prophet whose skill lies in foreseeing the future. And Alec knew this very well because the Fays warned him. Not knowing what he was thinking, the guy became very tense and decided not to take any risks. After thinking for a while, he asked Joanna to reschedule their meeting with Marty. Alec understood that the Mist Tracker was not yet able to see the future at will, so he could change his mind and thereby change the future. It wasn't hard to guess that this anonymous call was from Marco. A couple of minutes later, Marty came outside and said that Alec had moved the meeting 3 hours later and to a different location. "That's right. I said Erika Ninagawa is following him," our hero said, holding back a smile. "What? You contacted this Erika?" the guy asked, surprised. "No, we don't have any connections in this life. But it's important to make Alec think she's nearby. He's timid and distrustful. I'm just waging psychological warfare on him for now," Marco replied. Besides, our hero wanted Erika to join them. He knew that once she saw the future they had created, she would come to them herself. Having told the guy his plan, our hero got ready to go about his business. But Marty stopped him and asked in a frightened voice, "What will happen when the 3 prophets gather in Korea?" "Nothing special. They'll defend Korea for us, starting from the second gate of hell," the man whispered. Meanwhile, Alec's plane had already landed at the international airport. Despite the chaos that was happening in the world, the airport functioned normally, thanks to the efforts of the military and our heroes. First of all, the team wanted to inspect the area where they would meet with the Korean prophet. But Hans and Joanna wanted to eat after the long flight. "It's quite possible we'll have to fight, so it wouldn't hurt to eat. I suggest we go to a European restaurant," Alex said in a gloomy voice. Hans had lived in Korea for some time and knew of a great restaurant serving local cuisine. When suddenly Joanna said, "Hans, the gates of hell have opened here. Do you think in such a tiny country anything has survived except the infrastructure?" But to their surprise, the city was virtually undamaged, including Hans's favorite restaurant. At dinner, Alec once again discussed all the possible scenarios. After dinner, the guys went to study Korean culture, because they still had a lot of time before meeting Marty. Joanna even bought herself national holiday clothes and ate Korean food at every opportunity. The guys wanted to enjoy Korea while there was still something left of it, seeing whole buildings of happy people. Joanna was very surprised because she expected to see rivers of blood and ruins here. Even Alec, with his pride, admitted that the Korean prophets had done their job perfectly. Meanwhile, our hero came to some girl. "I knew that you would come to me, the regressor, which my higher creation, the Pathfinder of the Fog, mentioned. And I'm not mistaken. It's you, right?" "Marco got a second chance," the stranger whispered with a sly smile. Alec chose the 63rd floor of an unfinished business center as the new meeting place. And he chose this place for a reason. It is very difficult to set up an ambush here and gather a large number of people. To make the meeting look like negotiations rather than preparation for battle, Joanna and Hans remained below. After only a few minutes of waiting, the guy heard from behind him, "Mr. Alex Trayman, is that you? Nice to meet you. My name is Sam," the guy added, emerging from the shadows. "And I'm pleased, I must say. You're much bigger than you seemed in the video. Anyway, thank you for coming despite the sudden schedule change," Alec replied, extending his hand in respect. But instead of shaking hands in return, Sam simply asks first. At this moment, Alec became very nervous, because he realized that Sam knew about his ability of moon vision. Moon vision is a skill that allows you to determine your opponent's power level. But most of all, the guy was worried that Sam would find out that he used the Eye of the Sun to find and recruit Joanna and Hans. However, now these are just his guesses that are not supported by any evidence. Trying to maintain a cooperative spirit, Alex said, "I'm pleasantly surprised that Korea was able to defend its territory, when even England, which had a prophet like me, suffered huge losses. You and your partner did a good job here. You were the ones who dealt with those creatures in Senchon, right?" the guy asked in a slightly cheeky manner. "I'm flattered, but it's also thanks to the Army's quick response, as well as the citizens who cooperated with us," Sam replied indifferently. "I know why you came here, and it wasn't for me. This guy gave me the weapon," the guy added, pointing his finger at the elevator, after which Marty came out of it. Alec assumed that he was the main one in their couple. Trying to make contact, the man extended his hand and introduced himself. Marty laughed and patted his head, responding in kind. The fact that the boys didn't shake his hand convinced Alec that they knew about his abilities. Watching your fight, I noticed that you moved like a true professional, something that an ordinary actor like me couldn't match, the Briton said, trying to shower Marty with flattery. There's no need to be modest because thanks to you, everyone in the world learned about the prophets, the guy replied, smiling. After finishing the meaningless conversations, Alec directly asked Marty whether he was a prophet or not. I understand your interest, but I can't reveal all the details because I'm not sure whether you're an enemy or an ally, Marty replied, no longer smiling. I agree, at times like these you have to be careful. Unfortunately, we have nothing more to discuss. But I have something interesting for you. St. Mary's Hospital, Norajin Station. It seems you've also set your sights on the title Savior, Marty whispered gloomily. These words were like an electric shock to Alec. St. Mary's Hospital is where Hans and Joanna are hiding. Realizing the boy knows everything about him, Alec tried to persuade him to join them. The guy talked for a long time about how the world would soon be drowned in blood and human weapons would become useless, and about his plans to create an international alliance of prophets to fight the monsters. After he finished his fiery speech, Sam and Marty stared at him. You speak beautifully, but these are just words. I'm sure you're just playing the hero and don't care about humanity. Creating an alliance would be a good idea if it didn't mean absolute power over everyone in your hands, Marty replied with an icy glare. Alec was incredibly surprised that the guys were able to figure out his true intentions, after which it became clear that there would be no more negotiations. Wanting to take advantage of the moment of surprise, the guy went on the attack, concentrating it on Marty. Luckily, Sam managed to react and push his friend aside. The guy got off with just a slight cut on his cheek. After the failed attack, Alec shouted, "This is why the foresight skill is so nasty. There is no justice." Let's be honest. The guys are just small fry compared to the Prophet's abilities. Considering that they could create a number of problems in the future, the Briton decided to kill them. And we will return to our hero, to Erica's house. Long time no see. Ninavaga Erica, Marco said politely. Yes, long time. It seems we've known each other since your past life, the girl replied. How did it all go? The future I planned. Alec and Marty met. He will try to take himself out for the profit of the Pathfinder. Now the Briton wants to get him out of the way. Or rather, his goal is to get rid of the prophet of the Pathfinder of the Fog. But who knows what might happen? What if Alec somehow finds out that the Mist Ranger is you, Erica? I know this sounds harsh, but you have no choice but to join us. I know the future even without your powers. That's exactly why you came to Korea, right? Our hero said confidently. You're right, Erica whispered. You'll have to play by my rules, but you still put your pride aside and came, for which I thank you very much, added Marco. I can't know everything that will happen in the future like you do, but I can get a glimpse of it, the girl replied discontentedly. Then Marco took out his phone and shouted loudly, Did you just catch a glimpse of this? Alec's voice. I'm going to kill the Mist Ranger Prophet. At that moment, Marty took the microphone hidden in his jacket and said, See, he's going to kill you. Realizing that he had just been deceived, the Briton froze in horror. And at that moment, someone came up to him from behind and struck with all his might, so that the prophet flew back several meters. What kind of a scarecrow are you? Alec shouted, stopping himself with his sword. You don't need to know my name, just know one thing. Erica's enemy must die. The man replied, his eyes wild. Not understanding what was happening, Alec began to accuse Marty of lying. Did I deceive you? And when did I ever say I was a prophet? I just threw out the bait and you took it, the guy replied with a smug smile. I'm trying to somehow get out of this situation. The prophet started threatening everyone in a row. But Erica's guardian quickly brought him to his senses and reminded him that he didn't have a trump card right now with a powerful blow to the stomach. An ordinary person would have already died from his wounds. Now Alec wanted to know more about Eric. But then a thought popped into his head. What if this whole thing was a double deception? And in fact, Erica doesn't exist, and this is all Marty's doing. When suddenly the guardian, in a hoarse voice, said, You can be sure that Lady Erica exists! After which the man hit him again. Marco and Erica had no doubt that Alec had good intentions from the start. Every person dreams of ideas about a better world, but only a few can realize such ambitions. And in this regard, Alec Trayman is a special person. Among the 8 battle stars, witness of the sun and moon, gives the greatest advantage to the prophet at the beginning of the carnival. It's easier for him than anyone to pretend to be a superior being, full of humanity, in order to achieve his personal goals and, at the same time, help people. However, what the witness of the sun and moon truly desires is to see the human world overflowing with greed. To satisfy its sophisticated taste, the Fays chose Alec. Convinced that Tremont posed a real threat to her, Erica said, "Marco, what about you? You're not that different from him. As you already know, my precognitive powers are still in their infancy. Where is the proof from a distant future I can't see? I need assurances that you won't betray me. At the very least, a guarantee that you won't end humanity's existence," Erica added carefully. "That's such a short-sighted question, Erica. What you really want to know is what will happen in the end if you don't follow the regressor," Marco replied with a creepy smile, unleashing his prophetic aura. Meanwhile, Alec was still trying to escape from Erica's guard. Realizing that he wouldn't be able to leave peacefully, the guy decided to kill him. The biggest problem in fighting a man like Alec is his weapon. His sword is suitable for both close-range and long-range attacks. It is almost impossible to deflect the blows of this sword. The only chance to avoid death is to dodge. Erica's guard was a former professional killer, so he had enough skills to avoid a direct hit. When suddenly, Alec simply disappeared right before the man's eyes. And a moment later, a voice came from the darkness. "You know, I didn't study martial arts in Hollywood. I qualified and served for several years as an undercover agent for the SLS, the guy added in a creepy voice, after which he went on the attack again. SLS was a secret group of assassins who carried out the government's most difficult contracts. And upon learning that Alec was one of their agents, Sam said, "Marty, it seems we need to help Igor." "Don't rush. Let them sort it out like men," the guy replied indifferently. At that moment, Igor turned to them and asked for help. The boys doubted whether they should get involved in a fight with the prophet, but they could not leave the guard in trouble. "You have no honor if you decide to attack 3 against 1, but I will not hold back either," Alec shouted, swinging his sword. Swinging his sword, the guy launched a whirlwind of dark energy straight at our heroes. For Igor, this meant the end, since there was nothing to block the blow with, and it was impossible to dodge. Luckily for him, Sam and Marty arrived in time. But only Marty's sword was able to block the attack. Thanks to the guys, the whirlwind lost some of its power, so Igor wasn't cut into 2 parts. Suddenly, Alec said, "How were you able to block my galactic sword? You had a different weapon in the video. It's impossible you bought equipment on par with the sword the Supreme Being gave me. Where did you get it? Who gave it to you? Was it Erica or a higher being?" the guy added angrily. Realizing the boys were hiding something, Alec decided to take the prisoner and interrogate him. And for that, he only needed one person. So he was going to kill Igor and Sam. Unfortunately, Marty can't fully control the tyrant's sword, as he recognizes Marco as its master. The boy simply carries it around, pretending to be a prophet. However, as a sword master, he is able to connect his soul with this blade, which will give him a piece of the tyrant's power. He had already done something similar when he killed the goblin leader. Alec froze in shock at the sight of the fusion process. After all, even he can't completely unite his soul with the galactic sword. When suddenly Marty swung his sword, and a bright red attack wave flew towards the enemy. Having time to react, the prophet simply cut it down. But this was only a diversionary maneuver, so that Sam could get closer to the striking distance. Not expecting such a combination, Alec missed the blow straight to the chest. "Hey, actor, are all the rumors about SLS really false?" Sam shouted mockingly. When the smoke from Marty's attack cleared, the boy saw that Alec had actually simply stopped his blow with his hand. "You can say whatever you want, but can you handle 3 SLS members?" the Briton replied with a wry smile.
"With 3.
Sam whispered in a trembling voice, after which Joanna paralyzed him with one precise blow to the neck, and Hans knocked Marty out with a powerful hook. That's it. All our heroes were out cold. Realizing that they were in enemy territory, Hans suggested an immediate retreat and return home. But Alec wasn't going to leave just like that. He wanted to cut off the guys' heads and send them to those who were behind them. But then Hans pointed at Igor and said, "I understand you, but that guy works for an association of killers called Sunset. Their leader is very strong. It is better not to provoke him." "Did you even realize what you just said? I have no equal on this planet. Alec shouted angrily, when suddenly someone grabbed Hans by the neck and squeezed with all his strength so that he lost consciousness. "Impossible! I definitely hit the target," Joanna whispered in fear. Hearing this, Marty laughed loudly. "You got it, but for our Sam, it's nothing." "You fools! You woke the ogre and now you'll pay for it," the guy added, laughing loudly. I don't understand what Marty is talking about. The English thought that Sam had some kind of hidden gift. However, the boy told them that he had been like this since birth. Ogre mode may not be able to match the power of the Prophet, but to neutralize the SLS agents, this is enough. This is the first time in all the time that the British have been working together that someone has managed to knock out Hans. Seeing what the enemy was capable of, Joanna took out the demon fox's tail. This certainly gave the girl a huge advantage in terms of techniques, while Sam must rely only on his physical strength. When suddenly the guy grabbed the demonic leaf with his bare hand and pulled it towards himself with all his strength, in such a way that Joanna flew up to him, after which he delivered a light blow to the face, because of which the girl lost consciousness and fell to the floor. At the moment of her landing, Sam was very surprised because he did not hear any sound. While he was trying to understand what was happening, Joanna came up behind him and grabbed him in a chokehold. For her, this was the only way to defeat such a big guy who was stronger than her. Squeezing her hands tighter and tighter, the girl said, "SLS. These are not just trained fighters." Seeing Sam begin to lose strength, Marty realized that Joanna had figured out the principle of his ogre mode and cut off the flow of oxygen to his brain. Realizing that if he didn't help his friend, they would all die, the boy tried to get up. At that moment, Alec approached Sam. He asked Joanna to step back so he could cut the guy's body in half. Seeing the Prophet swing his sword, the boy prepared to die. But once again, Marty came to his aid, blocking Alec's blow. "Who are you? How could you stand up and block my blow again?" the Prophet shouted angrily. "People like you can't understand us. Our strength didn't come out of nowhere. We earned it through perseverance and hard work," Marty replied with a slight smile. Not wanting to listen to more nonsense, Alec intensified his blow and threw the guy back. "I feel bad, but it's not enough to break my spirit. And you're already on the edge," Marty whispered mockingly. These words made the Prophet lose his temper, and he lost control of his actions. In a fit of anger, he began to mindlessly swing his sword, hoping for the power he had been given. Although he failed to injure Marty, the boy felt his arm starting to fail. Trying to unbalance the guy, Alec started shouting all sorts of insults. Marty knew perfectly well that he needed to attack to win, but without 100% fusion with the sword spirit, it was suicide. However, not everything is so bad. Marco said that something should happen soon. The only thing you need to do is hold on for a little while longer. When suddenly a loud noise was heard in the room, as if something had collapsed. It was Sam who slammed Joanna into the wall with all his might. The girl understood perfectly well that if she let the guy go, then everyone would most likely die. So she held on to the grip with the last of her strength. But Sam is no fool. He felt that after the first blow, her grip weakened, so he simply repeated the blow, after which Joanna fell down like a sack of potatoes. And by this time, Hans came to his senses and caught the girl before she hit her. Seeing the guy's blinding smile, he whispered in a gloomy voice, "So you survived after all?" "Of course I'm tougher than you think," Hans replied. The previous blow had seriously injured him, but he tried not to show it. "It looks like we're about to witness an exciting duel between two monsters." Hans admitted that Sam was far stronger than him, but he had the advantage. This advantage lay in the high-tech equipment. The blaster is an artifact created for stormtroopers by a magical engineer, and its capabilities are clear from its name. It creates explosions. A powerful explosion distracted Marty, and Alec took advantage of this to attack. Marty had no chance to block or dodge. This can be considered the end. Sam was blown up and Marty was stabbed to death. Having made sure that they were dead, Alec ordered their heads to be brought to him. And they will take Igor as a hostage and interrogate him upon returning home. Coming closer and looking at Sam's charred body, Joanna said, "Damn! You almost broke my back. But don't worry, I'm not angry. In return for this, I'll take your head," the girl added in a creepy voice. As Alec was leaving, Marty whispered with his last bit of strength, "I feel sorry for you idiots." After which, a powerful earthquake began, and the room was filled with a bright blue light. Just now, the second Hell's Gate opened in Korea. And let's be honest, Alec wasn't very happy about it. They will have to fight monsters to protect themselves and Korea, trying to come up with a plan on how to get home quickly. A pleasant melody began to play in the room. "Hey, Alec, you're on the phone. I suggest you pick up," Marty said with a grin, taking his phone out of his pocket. Of course, the call was from an unknown subscriber. Snatching the phone from the guy's hands, Alec shouted angrily, "Who is this? What do you want?" "Calm down, I just wanted to ask how things are," the voice answered on the phone. "It's you again. You're the one connected to Erica. I'll find you and kill you," the prophet shouted, unable to contain himself. "You mean after you survive? If you don't hurry, you'll be in trouble," Marco added indifferently. At that moment, it finally dawned on the guy that the person he was talking to knew about the opening of the gate. Sensing that Alec was frightened, our hero said, "Good luck. If you succeed, you will be famous as the English prophet who saved Korea." Realizing that he had been manipulated all this time, the guy got angry and smashed the phone. In a fit of anger, he ordered the death of Sam, Marty, and Igor. Even though this order was contrary to some of the boys' principles, they couldn't help but carry it out. When suddenly at that moment Hans shouted, "Be careful!" After which he pounced on Joanna, saving her from an arrow shot. At first the guys thought it was from a rifle. After all, a shot from a bow from such a distance is hardly possible, and with such accuracy. However, the incoming arrow showed that this was possible. As Alec tried to find the archer's position, he miraculously managed to dodge another shot, after which arrows began to fly into the windows one after another. Realizing that they were an easy target here, the British decided to retreat immediately. It's actually a miracle that Sam and Marty survived. Having come to their senses, the guys promised each other that they would never agree to such a thing again. Watching the second Hell's Gate open, Erica asked our hero, "Everything happened as you said, but they appeared much earlier than they should have originally, due to the rapid closing of the first gate. How did you guess the exact time?" Apparently you don't fully understand what it means to be a regressor. Not only do I remember the future, I also possess various information that is not available to anyone else. Erica, I know you know that dungeons began appearing on every continent after the first hellish gates closed. Japan went through that too, after all. Yes, many powerful people from all over the world have found these dungeons and passed through them. Such are the hidden conditions of the gates of hell. When all the world's dungeons are completed, new gates open. In my past life, the last country I completed a dungeon in was Japan. And if you're here, that means the dungeon is complete. That's why I called you here to open a new gate, Marco added. "I'm surprised you know everything to such a degree that you don't need to look into the future," Erica replied apprehensively. "This time I was just lucky, but this life is very different from the last one. And with each passing day, there will be more and more differences. And at some point, memories will no longer be enough. And at that moment, you, the prophet looking into the future, will surpass the regressor," our hero added in a heavy, monotonous voice. "I agree that everything will change. But what do you need from me?" Erica asked, feeling in demand. "Nothing special, just help me close the second gate. I managed the first one myself, but this time it might not work," Marco answered in a pitiful voice. "And you are smart. All ports and airports are closed, so I have no other choice if I want to go home. If I were you, I would be proud that I was able to deceive the prophet of the fog. This time we'll lend you a helping hand. In solidarity," Erica added, after which a silhouette appeared behind her. As our hero had hoped, Erica didn't come alone. She brought the Ninagawa warriors with her, led by their legendary captain, Katsu. Erica brought them with her because she didn't know how her meeting with our hero would end. After all, the future is vague and changeable. Now that Marco has a squad of legendary Japanese warriors as allies, he decides to reveal the strategy for dealing with the Hellgate monsters. "Katsu, you and your men shouldn't pay attention to Hell's Gate," our hero said in a serious voice. "I hope that was just a joke because a boss is supposed to emerge from them," the captain replied in surprise. "The boss won't be there, and someone else will be in charge of the gates themselves," Marco added. "Wait, what do you mean the boss won't be there? Where will he appear then?" Erica and Katsu asked synchronously. Looking towards the ocean, our hero said, "It will be so." Taking a closer look, the boys noticed how the calm water began to turn into a whirlpool, the boss of the second hellish gate. the scourge of the oceans, an underwater creature better known as the serpent. The biggest problem is its size and habitat. However, there is one way to finish him off. There is a weakness common to all snake-like magical creatures: weak scales under the chin. Having learned of this vulnerability, cats thought that killing the snake would be easy. That's true, but to even scratch it, you need a weapon no weaker than a rare class. When suddenly Erica said, "This is a problem. As far as I know, only Alec Trayman has such a weapon." "The lady is right. You're smart if you invited him here for this," added Katsu. "That's where you're wrong. If I did that, he would have taken all the credit," replied Marco. "Wait, don't tell me you're going to steal the sword from Alec," the captain asked fearfully. "I'll be honest, this thought has crossed my mind, and I would be glad to do so, but there is no need," our hero answered in a whisper, after which the tyrant's sword flew into the room, breaking a huge window and fiddling with the ceiling. "What the hell just happened?" Katsu shouted, seeing the huge sword. And in the broken window, more than 100 meters away, he saw a boy and a man. What a surprise! Only he, Peter, could fire a sword like an arrow. Taking the sword out of the ceiling, Marco said with a slight smile, "Interesting, isn't it?" The fact that Ken and his father returned told our hero that everything was fine with Sam and Marty. Now that they have a weapon that can pierce the scales of a snake, they can go hunting. For Katsu, a boss fight has always been a reward where he can unleash his potential. Leaving with our hero, the captain ordered his squad to protect Erica at any cost. Leader Ninagawa took charge of the distraction element. His goal was to distract the snake so that Marco could quickly deal with it. However, this plan was doomed to failure. Our hero knew that the monster would never show its vulnerable spot unless it was angered. "I see. But how will we do this?" asked Katsu. "That's it!" our hero shouted, and dealt a powerful cutting blow to the snake. As expected, this threw the monster off balance, and he went berserk. "Stop! His skin is too slippery! I'll fall!" Katsu shouted. "Small sacrifices are necessary for the greater good. Better let it eat us." "Then swallow 5 oceans!" answered Marco, plunging his sword into the serpent with all his might. Due to the intense pain, the monster began to move chaotically, destroying bridges and coastal areas. It turned out that he threw our heroes high into the sky and opened his huge mouth intending to swallow them. Trying not to become food for the monster, Katsu threw a shuriken with a rope attached, which successfully wrapped itself around the monster's fang, thereby stopping the guy from falling. "The rumors weren't lying, you're quite good!" Marco shouted, standing on the snake's lip. "Yeah, thank you very much. Pull me out before it closes its mouth." Katsu screamed in fear. "You're right, we need to do it before it closes it." "Catch!" our hero shouted, laughing, jumping to the boy's aid. But instead of getting him out, the man cut his lifeline. And now they both fall straight into the monster's stomach. So far, it seems like pure madness. But Marco doesn't do anything without a reason. Meanwhile, fighting has already begun on the streets of Seoul. Reluctantly, Alec was drawn into the Korean battle. Joanna and Hans were with him, and they fought off the monster's attacks quite successfully. The only thing that worried them was that, despite everything, the monsters kept coming in numbers. The boys immediately realized that these reptiles were much stronger than the goblins that were there the first time. The only one on the whole team who could really fight effectively against them was Alec. With the power of the Prophet and the sword of the galaxy, he cleared the way forward. All this time, Sam and Marty were carefully watching them. They didn't have the strength to fight the monsters, so they walked along the road cleared by the British, trying not to be seen. Feeling helpless, the boys became sad. After all, no matter how hard they try, they can never compare to Alec, although it would be more correct to say to the Prophet. In fact, the boys were now in a very dangerous situation. There were monsters swarming all around, and Alec was nearby wanting them dead. And at the same time, they have absolutely no weapons for defense, because the tyrant Marty returned the sword. At some point, the guys stopped and just watched as tens of thousands of lizards emerged from the gate. The only way out for them is to get to the Ruru Tower, where they are supposed to meet up with the rest of the guys. At some point, Sam noticed something strange. Alec and his team were moving towards the tower. At this point, the guys began to worry that they had somehow managed to find out about their meeting place. But this is just a happy coincidence. Hans simply left their car right at the Ruru Tower. Upon learning of this, Sam and Marty wanted to warn their friends. but the telephone connection was out of order. The boys understood perfectly well that they had to get to the tower before Alec, otherwise he would kill them all. When suddenly they heard a terrible roar changing to a hiss. Looking up, they saw a whole group of lizards flying towards them. I understand that there is no time to waste. Marty immediately summoned the Prince of Winter. A few swings and the monsters found themselves in ice traps. But they didn't finish off the guy because they didn't have time for that. However, when the carnival is in full swing on the streets, not killing monsters is a mistake. The ice prison was only able to immobilize the lizards for a few seconds. It was a mistake that could have cost the boys their lives if no one had come to their aid. Ken suspected that the guys might have problems, so he went out to meet them. And as we can see, it was not in vain. The situation on the streets was getting worse and worse with every second. The army is absolutely powerless against these lizards, so people can only flee and hope that there will be those nearby who can help. Before leaving, Marco gave his team clear instructions. Do everything possible to save as many people as possible without sacrificing your own lives. In the fight against the water creatures, Alice's lightning magic came in handy. With one spell, the girl killed all the monsters that ended up in the water. For her, the resulting conditions are the most favorable. Even Peter, who was just getting to the bottom of everything that was happening, was amazed by her abilities. "Uncle, these are just my skills. And besides, you can kill them in one shot too," Alice whispered shyly. "Well, yes, it's all thanks to the magical bow. It's a strange feeling to shoot from one. By the way, Alice, aren't you worried about Dad?" Peter asked, seeing the enraged snake. "Honestly, there is a little, but he is a regressor, so I'm more worried about Ken and Uncle Marty," the girl answered. Meanwhile, the guys have already met. The first thing Sam and Marty did was thank Ken for his help and ask how everyone else was doing. The boy said that his father and Alice were protecting people, and Marco went to fight the boss and some stranger. Jumping off a high bridge was quite problematic for Ken, so he suggested meeting at the Olympic Bridge crossing, which is a 10-minute walk away, when suddenly a familiar voice was heard. "Don't be afraid, jump! Otherwise, I'll lower you down myself." It was Alec, the guy from the start, who noticed they were being followed, and waited for the right moment. Without thinking twice, he summoned his galactic sword, and cut down the bridge on which Ken stood. The boy will be very lucky if he is not crushed by the debris. Sam thought it was impossible, but he was sure that Alec had become much stronger. After the bridge collapsed, the prophet released his eerie aura and came closer, and said, "Apparently it was you who shot at us then, jump, and I will give you a quick death." "What's wrong with you? You're ready to kill even a child," Marty shouted angrily. "I don't care about him, I want to kill him, and if he becomes a collateral victim, that's fate," the prophet added with a creepy smile. When suddenly Joanna said in a trembling voice, "Ah, Alec, there." At this moment, Zamie had already gotten very close to the city. As befits a monster, he began to destroy everything that caught his eye. With just one push, the boss could have demolished an entire skyscraper. But then his attention was drawn to the people standing on the shore. Realizing that they could become the monster's next target, Marty and the others decided to run away immediately. However, running away from such a large and fast enemy was useless. Luckily, Sam and Ken were not injured in the attack. But they couldn't find Marty and Igor anywhere. Alec also managed to survive, when suddenly the guy's attention was attracted by something strange. He saw a small purple scale under the snake's chin, and then he remembered the words of his phase. "The only thing that can destroy uncommon armor is a weapon of rare rank or higher." Did the phase really give Alec his galactic sword just for this? The realization that he was the only one capable of killing this monster inflated his ego even more. Touching the snake, Alec shouted through his laughter, "Marty, it seems that even you and Erica couldn't foresee this. To be great is my destiny. I was destined to kill this monster and become the master of the world." But then something inexplicable began to happen. The scales around the purple scale began to peel off, and a bright red light began to emit from the monster's body. Thinking it was some kind of boss attack, Alec was sure he was finished. However, after just a second, the purple scale shattered into pieces, meaning that the world boss had been defeated. Trying to understand what had just happened, the prophet saw a stranger emerge from the monster's body. They had never met before, but Alec felt threatened by him. And at that moment, Sam and Ken shouted joyfully, "Marco, you're finally here!" By this time, Marty had managed to escape from under the bridge rubble. Looking at our hero, Alec couldn't understand why he felt such a threat from him. However, after taking a closer look, he understood everything when he saw that very sword in Marco's hands. After which he shouted loudly, "So this is your sword! Why did you send Marty to me? Stop screaming and just accept my gratitude for killing all the lizards. Without it, I wouldn't have been able to lure the snake here," Marco answered with a slight smile. At that moment, all participants within a 50-meter radius were awarded a reward. Everyone received a snake scale, which could be exchanged for 2,000 heads. Alec was furious at the realization that he had been Marco's pawn all this time. Our hero didn't particularly care since he received a special reward for killing the snake, namely, that very unique scale, which exists in a single copy. However, the Briton wasn't about to leave things as they were. He ordered his men to kill our hero and everyone else. As soon as they went on the attack, poisonous thorns immediately flew at them. Thanks to their quick reaction, they responded in time and repelled the attack. At that moment, Katsu jumped out of the monster's body and said, "Marco, you're good!" Well, as you said, the most difficult battle awaits us ahead. Well, now everything depends on Alec and our hero. Only they can decide the future of their meeting. When you see Marco's team in full force in front of you, the prophet began to laugh loudly. And it wasn't just laughter. That's how people laugh when they go crazy. This laughter terrified everyone except Marco, when suddenly, through his laughter, Alec whispered in a creepy voice, "Erica, Marco, there's the bow boy, and now there's a ninja. Why don't so many people know their place? There can only be one chosen person, and that is me." Marty and Ken understood that this would not end so easily, so they prepared to fight. Feeling their captain unleash his battle aura, Joanna and Hans also prepared to join the fight. Not wanting to waste his precious time on what he considered idiots, the prophet immediately went on the attack. At that moment, Alice appeared and reflected his blow with one spell. Looking at Alec with disdain, the girl said, "So you are that prophet who praises himself on TV." Everything that happened was a real surprise for the Briton, because he didn't know that real magicians existed in the world. But what struck him most was not the existence of magic itself, but how powerful it was, since Erica was able to deflect the blow of the galactic sword at such an early stage. At that moment, Marco snapped his fingers, after which a whole squad of ninja appeared, whom Katsu ordered to escort the British to the airport. But seeing the weapons in the fighters' hands, Alec and the team doubted these words. Suddenly, the ninja threw kunai and shuriken towards the British. Now they had no doubt. Katz's order meant their elimination. However, to their surprise, this attack was not directed at them at all, but at a squad of lizards that were sneaking up on them from behind. After which Marco said, "We will definitely meet again, but now it's better for you to go to the airport. They are already waiting for you there." Having swallowed all his ambitions, Alec replied, "Perhaps you are right, but make no mistake, he changed his mind because reporters showed up. And for Alec, the worst thing is to lose his reputation in the eyes of people." When the situation finally stabilized, Marco said, "Daughter, you came just in time. Just a little more and we would have had huge problems." "I didn't expect to hear that from a monster slayer, Marco," Peter said unexpectedly. "Well, monsters are pretty easy to deal with, but there's little that can help against these guys. Especially after what happened here, he'll definitely want revenge," our hero replied. "If they're so dangerous, maybe we shouldn't have shared the reward with them since we helped them that way," Peter added. "This was the least we could give him to survive. Besides, very soon Alec will clear the dungeon in England and become even stronger. The most important thing is that we became the ones who defeated the world boss," Marco replied. "Now that the boss is dead and the British are heading home, it's time to leave." At that moment, Erica appeared out of nowhere and said, "Marco, next time the topic of who will defeat the world boss will be us. I'll be waiting," our hero answered with a slight smile. Having taken Igor, the girl thanked Sam and Marty for saving him, after which they left. Given the girl's family's influence in Japan, our hero intended to keep an eye on her even more closely than on Alec, when suddenly Marco reached into his pocket and said joyfully, "They are all cool, but we have something that they don't have." After which he took out a small cloth bag, which surprised everyone. It was a bag with a whole bunch of runes, which they managed to get thanks to Ken's unique ability. Most of these stones are of low rank. However, for Peter, who was recently in a coma, even their effect could be significant. In fact, giving the runes to such a weak person is a real waste, but it is in our hero's interests that Peter live long. After all, his gift for dropping runes is much higher than his son's. He just needs time to reveal it. When suddenly our hero turned to the team and said, "Guys, if you need any rune, don't hesitate and take it." In fact, leveling up a group with the help of rather mediocre runes is a very good plan for the long term. Even though the second gates of hell were closed, lizards still roamed the city, which our heroes eliminated quite successfully. After killing all the lizards, the carnival finally came to an end, and all the survivors received 1,000 heads. Listen, Marco, I've been meaning to ask you this. It's much easier for you with us than it was in your previous life, isn't it? Marty asked worriedly. Of course, we're already more than 2 months ahead of the curve, but don't get too excited. Horrible creatures will appear in the future. We need to act strictly according to plan, our hero replied. When suddenly a powerful explosion thundered. Erica pointed her finger towards the city and shouted, "Dad, it's there!" For some strange reason, the National Assembly building exploded, causing a massive fire. Moreover, these incomprehensible explosions occurred all over the city. By this time, it was possible to find out that these explosions were caused by an attack by previously unknown creatures. At the time of the attack, a meeting of the country's leaders was taking place inside the assembly. The president is in critical condition, and the ministers of economy, finance, education, and foreign affairs have disappeared. Fortunately, the government had a plan for such a contingency, developed back in the 1980s. At the moment, Prime Minister Park has taken over the leadership of the country, and his first order was to find the very man who led the squad of fighters and saved Korea. And of course, he meant our hero. And we move on to the next day. The boys quickly learned that Minister Park was planning to create a special group to fight monsters. And Park himself was a very good person with good intentions. But there was one big problem. In his past life, after gaining power, Prime Minister Park attempted to create an army of monsters. However, he failed due to unforeseen circumstances. To be honest, he was very close to success, but his plan failed because of Defense Minister Daeho, who staged a coup d'etat. For Marty, learning all this was a real shock, because he considered Minister Park a good man. After gaining power, he imposed martial law throughout the country, but made a huge mistake by concentrating all his soldiers in Seoul, because of which all the other cities fell into flames. When suddenly Marty said, "If you knew about the explosion in advance, wouldn't it have been better to save the president personally?" No, the serpent's appearance was far from Parliament, and if I hadn't eliminated him, the consequences would have been far more serious, Marco answered thoughtfully. And in this, Marty agreed with him, because saving the lives of many is far more important than saving the life of one person, even if he's the president. Besides, Alec would have become famous. When suddenly, from behind the dense forest, a second man in a suit emerged. "Mr. Marco, we have orders to escort you. Could you come with us?" one of the strangers suddenly said. Pretending not to understand anything, our hero replied, "I think you should introduce yourself first." "Please excuse me. My name is Ji-won. I'm a member of the counterterrorism department at BH. We're here to take it from you." BH, the secret base of the Korean Secret Services, where the country's most important affairs are decided. Having accepted Javon's offer, our hero followed him. As Marco expected, he had a meeting with Minister Park. The minister introduced himself and apologized to our hero for such a barbaric invitation, after which he got straight to the point. "I know that it was you who killed that very water monster, for which I thank you very much." Without showing any emotion, Marco replied, "I think I should be thanking you for calling me to the Blue House and not to the interrogation room." "What are you? It would be wrong to interrogate a hero like you," Minister Park added with a slight smile. Our hero was surprised by how carefree the man felt in the presence of the man who single-handedly killed the boss. But now it's clear how Daeho was able to kill him. Be that as it may, in this life he needs the Prime Minister alive. To do this, Marco pretended to get angry and shouted loudly, "If you continue to trust people so easily, one day you may lose your life." And in order for his words to be clearly imprinted in the man's brain, he summoned the Titan Sword. At this point, security intervened, ordering our hero to immediately drop his weapon. Ignoring them, Marco approached the minister and whispered, The fate of the entire country now depends on you. How can you trust your life to such scum in such a situation? You got the information from the Yaksha. My advice to you is to be afraid not only of monsters, but also of people. You can't die yet, Mr. Pack, our hero added. I think I'll remember this advice, the man answered in a trembling voice. At that moment, Marco felt something rapidly approaching him. It was a small dagger, after which a female voice was heard. Reserve Captain Marco, lay down your arms immediately. Telekinesis? For a mere mortal, you awakened your abilities so quickly, our hero replied indifferently, after which, with a light swing of the sword, he cut the girl's dagger. But he didn't stop there. Wanting to know the girl's full potential, he went on the attack. To his surprise, she had already reached a level that allowed her to control several objects at once. However, her actions show a huge lack of experience. Her attacks are predictable and very slow. Marco didn't even have to strain to deflect all of her daggers. I have to give this girl credit. She fought very desperately. But even so, our hero was not going to stop. He wanted to show her what happens when you cross his path. At the moment when their blades were about to cross, Minister Park shouted with all his might, "Agent, stop immediately! He is our guest!" Surprised by what he heard, Marco stopped, but held the tyrant's sword near the girl's throat just in case. Melissa, the captain has opened my eyes to a simple truth. He had no intention of harming me, Minister Pack added, after which the man made our hero an offer to lead a special squad for catching monsters. Knowing that everything would be exactly like this, Marco tried to pretend to be surprised. Captain, I beg your pardon, but we really don't have much control over the situation right now. The only thing we have is surveillance video. We saw how skillfully you and your team used weapons and equipment. I ask you to help us. No, help all of Korea and lead this detachment, Melissa asked in a plaintive voice. Without thinking for a second, Marco refuses. For everyone present, this act was strange. But the reason was simple. Our hero did not want to take responsibility for the team and waste time on their training. And then Melissa reminded him that he had sworn an oath to do everything to protect the country. Did I say I wouldn't kill monsters? I'll do everything to protect the country. That's why I borrowed this power. And if you're talking about an oath, then I gave it to the people of Korea, not to the government. Let me ask you one question. Melissa, what are you fighting for? Marco asked in a rough voice. This question made the girl nervous. She didn't know how to answer. Seeing her frightened eyes, our hero said, I already know the answer. For the sake of my father, Defense Minister Daeho. It's impossible. How do you know about our relationship? It's classified information, Melissa whispered in a trembling voice. That doesn't matter. What matters is that he's currently plotting a coup d'etat, the man replied in a terrifying voice. At that moment, silence and bewilderment reigned in the room. Naturally, the girl didn't know anything and denied Marco's words. I believe that you know nothing about his plans, but I am confident in my words. You remember where I am from, right? The man added. Marco used to be the captain of Squad 711. For some reason, Minister Daeho disbanded the squad, but it was once considered the best in the entire country. Not only for its combat prowess, but also for its exceptional awareness. This fact made our hero's words more weighty. Captain, if this is true, then you should take command of the crew even more so, Minister Pack cried out in fear. However, Marco's answer remained the same. After all, nothing would stop Daeho. Mr. Pack, understand one simple thing. He absolutely doesn't care whether there is chaos or order in the country. He developed this plan a long time ago. He will carry out the coup solely with his own forces, using pure weapons, the man said with a creepy look. Naturally, the minister was not very pleased with this news. In his past life, Daeho was so powerful that he even wielded a rare weapon. For an ordinary person, his combat prowess was simply astounding. Knowing this, Marco advised Minister Pack to become stronger himself and strengthen his position. Unfortunately, this is the only way to maintain order in the country. After listening attentively to our hero, Melissa said indignantly, Even intelligence has no information regarding a possible coup. Where is the guarantee that you haven't made this all up? Slamming his palm on the table, Pack said, You're right. We have absolutely no evidence. However, the captain is also right. No matter how much of a political professional you are, there's always the risk of losing to stronger forces. And unfortunately, this is more relevant now than ever. the minister added with a puzzled look. Melissa, maybe I'm wrong. Who are you fighting for? Marco asked, turning to the girl. After hearing this, the girl began to look even more puzzled. Our hero understood her perfectly. After all, he knew what he was talking about. But for her, his words were meaningless, difficult to accept. The man is confident her answer will remain the same. Unless, of course, nothing has changed in her since her previous life, which is unlikely. Just as the girl was about to answer, another man intervened in their conversation. Interesting conversations, Mr. Marco. However, I am sure that such things should be discussed with the minister. Besides, you have absolutely no evidence. In my opinion, conclusions should only be drawn after an intelligence investigation, the NAR head added. In the current situation, this decision seemed the most logical, and Minister Park supported it. At this point, the meeting in the Blue House was over. According to safety regulations, Melissa escorted our hero to the exit. They both felt awkward being alone together, which is not surprising. At some point, the girl plucked up her courage, and holding back tears, she asked, Captain Marco, what is the best way to deal with an enemy that is too tough for you? This question made our hero understand that the girl knew about her father's plans, or at least guessed about them. Seeing how hard it was for her now, Marco answered in a confident voice, Such enemies do not exist. If you can't defeat someone now, just become stronger, the man added. But how do I do this? Where do I start? Melissa cried, tears in her eyes. If you want to become stronger, come to Majan Market tomorrow evening, Marco answered indifferently. Why should I be there? The girl asked. The best swordsmen in Seoul aren't the NAR or the intelligence service, but you need to learn from the best, our hero replied with a smile. We are transported to the evening of the next day, to the Majan Market. This market is known throughout Korea as the best meat market in the country. However, after the carnival began, this market began to deal with far more than beef. Now they butcher monsters here. And all of this greatly surprised Melissa. But what surprised her most was that some of these monsters were still alive. Marco said that traders came up with this method a long time ago. They froze living creatures to eat them later. The girl, who grew up in a ministerial family, was disgusted by the mere thought that such a thing could be eaten. After wandering around the market for some time, our hero finally found what he was looking for. There was a huge, muscular man behind the counter who didn't want to talk to anyone. Making his most menacing face, Marco said, Hey, Muscle Mountain, I've come to the right place. By the way, how do you like lizard meat? Dude, I don't know what you want, but this meat is not for sale. You better leave peacefully, the merchant replied. At that moment, Melissa leaned towards Marco and whispered, Captain, this is the swordsman you told me about. He looks more like a drunkard than a swordsman. Without saying a word in response, our hero simply snatched the piece of meat from the man's hands. He rolled up his sleeves to the elbows and put on snow-white meat-cutting gloves. At that moment, the man and Melissa froze in anticipation, and Marco just silently started cooking something. The man was chopping herbs and spices so fast that it was impossible for the human eye to follow his movements. After a few minutes, Marco finished cooking. All that was left was to add the secret ingredient, taking out a small bottle of golden liquid from his coat. He poured it generously over all the resulting dishes, after which he said, No matter how talented you are, human bodies have limits. Quality is often more important than quantity. Isn't that right? Chairman of the Majan District Livestock Union, Gills. Or should I call you the king of gluttony? Our hero added with a slight smile. Looking at all this, Gills asked with a dissatisfied face, Who are you? How did you know that monster meat evaporates when heated and you made such wonderful dishes? You can call me a professional when it comes to cooking monsters' dishes, Marco replied rudely. Laughing out loud, Gills said, I didn't expect that anyone else would eat this tasteless crap. Okay, I eat it because I'm prone to gluttony, but why do you? For the same reason? The man added. No, it's simply delicious, our hero replied, smiling. You hear me, idiot? So you came here just to make fun of me. This meat tastes like rubber, Gills shouted angrily. I told you I'm a professional, just try it, answered Marco. Even though everything was made from monster meat, the food smelled amazing. At that moment, the man was unsure whether to try the food the stranger had prepared or not. After all, it could be poisoned. But because of his curse of gluttony, Gills always had to eat something, so he dared to try. After eating just one piece, all his taste buds seemed to go crazy. The lizards cooked by our hero were the most delicious meat the man had ever eaten. Therefore, Gills, without thinking for a second, asked the man for the recipe. "The recipe is the same as always. You just cook it like regular meat," Marco shouted, placing a vial of golden liquid on the table. "And this mysterious liquid is a jam made from the salt of the western coast of the Creusan, worth 100,000 heads. Nowadays, such a price is unaffordable for a man, and Marco knew this very well, so he agreed to give it to her if Gills fulfilled two of his requests. First, Gills must share his technique for cutting up corpses. The man found this request very strange, because his knowledge was not worth a penny, and in return he would receive such an expensive seasoning. However, Marco believed otherwise. Thanks to the butcher's work, people would become aware of the monster's weak points. It would be more accurate to say not about weak points, but about the structure of monsters, which will ultimately help to identify weak points. Melissa considered it a waste of time, because with the opening of new gates, the monsters are always different. The gates have only opened twice. How do you know the monsters won't repeat themselves? And we're certainly not finished with the lizards yet, by the way. Just don't tell me you've forgotten about the time of troubles, Marco said, a little irritated. Be that as it may, Gills decided to share his method of cutting up carcasses. "Great! She'll be your apprentice. I already know everything," Marco said, pointing his finger at Melissa. "Our hero's main goal is for Melissa to learn how to deliver effective blows while expending a minimum of effort. Considering that her telekinesis power is quite mediocre, this would be the best form of training. They have 3 days to do everything because after that, the time of troubles will begin." Despite the very concise lines, Gills was full of optimism. At the moment when Marco began to say his second request, a strong earthquake began, and real panic reigned in the market, when suddenly someone shouted, "Some kind of cave opened in front of the entrance." And indeed, right in front of the entrance to the market, a dungeon opened up. Seeing her, our hero whispered with a slight smile, "Just in time." "Gills, my second request. Serve beef instead of lizards." "What do you mean?" the man asked in a trembling voice. "Preferably minotaurs," added Marco with a sly smile on his face. Meanwhile, in our hero's shelter, Marty went to the supermarket while Sam and Alice were recovering from the fight with the lizards, when suddenly the girl asked, "Uncle, where is Dad now?" "I don't know exactly where he is now, but I know he went on a raid." "He threw the bag with the groceries on the shelf," answered Marty. Alice found it strange that her father went alone, since the reward in the dungeons is calculated based on the number of raiders, and together you can earn more. And that was true. But there are dungeons with certain restrictions, and this is just one of them. I wonder if these restrictions are related to the difficulty level or something else. In reality, it's much more trivial. In this dungeon, raiders act as victims. You've probably heard of the place where King Minos of ancient Crete imprisoned the half-man, half-bull creature. I'm talking about the Minotaur's labyrinth. This is an ancient Greek legend according to which every year people must sacrifice 7 young men to pacify the Minotaur. However, the phases have changed this legend a little. Only 3 can enter the dungeon. To be honest, Melissa and Gills weren't thrilled about having to become victims of the Minotaur. The next 3 people can only get here after the previous daredevils have died. There will be 7 attempts in total. But this is not the worst thing. If all 7 attempts fail, the gates of the labyrinth will open, and the Minotaur will emerge, thirsty for human flesh. Going downstairs, Melissa shared her worries with Marco. Most of all, the girl was worried about the fate of the butcher, since he was an ordinary civilian and did not possess any supernatural abilities. Her fears were justified because Gills had never butchered a Minotaur and had no idea what kind of monster it was. After listening to the girl, our hero revealed a little secret. Gills is a professional cattle catcher renowned throughout Korea. When suddenly the man laughed and said with a creepy look, "As long as this Minotaur has horns, I can deal with him." As you already understood, Marco came to Gills not only for the lemon balm. In a past life, it was he who carried out a successful raid on the Minotaur's dungeon. Since this dungeon is made in the form of a labyrinth, once they enter it, they will have to split up. Before opening the gate, Marco said, "There's one clue there. I'm not sure if it will help, though. If you are completely lost and in doubt, Go right. Right now, these words have absolutely no meaning, but let's see what happens inside. As expected, upon entering the dungeon, they were scattered to different ends of the labyrinth. The labyrinth itself was a difficult test for anyone, and the incredible heat added even more problems. The first step in completing this dungeon was to go through the labyrinth and climb up to the altar. It sounds simple, but this damn labyrinth is the size of an entire metropolis. To successfully complete the first stage of the walkthrough, all three must reach the altar. The good thing is that thanks to this information window, you can find out about the status of others. After taking a few steps, Marco stepped into a small puddle. "What the hell, is there water here?" our hero whispered in surprise, after which the man bent down and touched the water with his hand by activating the water serpent bracelet. This magical artifact allows one to control fish. The number of fish controlled depends on the user's spiritual strength. Marco originally planned to use this bracelet for other purposes, but it works great for the labyrinth too. Having created 3 aquatic clones of fish, our hero sent them to explore different paths. In simple terms, he made himself 3 scouts who are looking for a way out of the labyrinth. In a past life, he used this trick for similar purposes, but not in the Minotaur's lair, when suddenly the signal from all the scouts disappeared. And this happened when all the fish met in one place. And this means that Marco has discovered the location of the Minotaur. Despite the fact that our hero knew the exact route, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was continuing to walk in circles. Pausing to think, the man heard Melissa's voice asking for help. The girl was completely covered in blood and scratches, as if she had just run out of hell. Melissa grabbed Marco by the shoulders and screamed, "Captain, the monsters killed my entire squad!" Realizing that something was wrong with her, Marco began shaking her, trying to bring her to her senses. Well, no matter how hard he tried, everything only got worse. The girl turned into a walking corpse with red eyes before his eyes. "It's your fault. It was you who probably sent them to death. You gave that damn order to guard the tunnel and then you went off alone to fight the demons," Melissa added in a hissing voice, scratching our hero's shoulder, after which she suddenly went mad and screamed, "You sacrificed our entire squad!" to collect the heads of demons to escape into the past. Having hit the girl in the face, Marco shouted back, "Stop talking nonsense! Do you really believe that you have returned to the past? Are you sure the last demon you fought died? Didn't it ever occur to you that you were tricked into an eternal sleep?" Melissa said with wild eyes, a hand coming out of her mouth. Marco realized that he had fallen into an illusion, or, "Well, hello there, regressor. You didn't collect all the heads, you fell into my trap," the demon said, laughing as he emerged from the girl's body. With each passing second, the situation became worse and worse. Marco began to see fallen comrades who died because of him. The demon insisted that the return to the past was just an illusion, and in fact, our hero had been in hell all this time. And for a second, the man even believed it. But the Titan's sword spoke otherwise. Now he had no doubt that it was an illusion, and to dispel it, our hero plunged his sword straight into the monster's head. "You're saying that I sent people to certain death, and then I came back? And now their souls are tormented in hell? Even if that's the case, I don't regret my decision at all, and I would do it again!" Marco screamed, cutting open the demon's skull. "The illusion is shattered. But it's worth considering that the labyrinth is possibly capable of something even more terrifying." At this moment, our hero was most worried about how Gills and Melissa would cope with this test. After the illusions were dispelled, a gate to the boss's room appeared, meaning this trap is the Minotaur's defense. "I wonder how Gills got through that past life labyrinth. Mental attacks should have a different effect on him," Marco whispered. And at that very moment, the wall behind him was destroyed by Gills. Now everything is clear. It was clear from the man's face that he was scared and running away from something. But upon seeing our hero, fear gave way to surprise. "You're good. I thought I'd be first," Gills said with a slight smile. "Well, what did you think?" our hero answered sarcastically. Marco couldn't even imagine that the labyrinth's walls could be broken down like that. It turns out he still has a lot to learn. A couple of minutes later, Melissa appeared from one of the corridors. "I must admit I almost went crazy from the hallucinations. Thanks to the captain for his advice, otherwise I would never have been able to find you," the girl said, breathing heavily. Melissa saw her subordinate lose his leg because of her mistake, and this actually happened. But in the illusion, he was missing his left leg, while in reality he lost his right leg. None of that mattered now. Their most difficult test lay ahead. As soon as Marco opened the gate to the Minotaur's room, the sacrificial process began. As soon as all three crossed the threshold, the scale of victims was remembered, and the master of the labyrinth went hunting. All this time, the Minotaur was bound with strong chains. But as soon as he smelled the scent of people, his powers increased, and he was able to break the shackles. Just one step of his made the earth shake, and his howl made people go crazy. Having seen their opponent in person, Melissa and Gills were not particularly happy, because they understood that their chances of winning were slim. But it was too late to retreat or change anything. The Minotaur went on the attack. At this point, the guys hoped that Marco had some kind of plan and would start giving orders. But seeing that our hero was inactive, Melissa decided to act on her own, activating her telekinesis. Marco stopped her without explanation, after which he looked at the butchers with indignation. Having understood what was required of him, Gills, smiling, shouted, "I understand! You are cunning," taking his sharpest knife. The man ran forward without a drop of doubt. Surprisingly, his physical characteristics were not inferior to the Minotaur in any way. And for the monster, this was a real surprise, because powerful thrusts are his main weapon. But that wouldn't work against a butcher. Getting close enough, Gills plunged his knife straight into the Minotaur's belly, after which he turned the handle with all his might and made a deep cut, ripping open the monster's stomach. The Minotaur fell to one knee from the wound he received, and Gills took advantage of this to deliver the finishing blow. Watching him fight, Melissa asked in surprise, "Is he really just a simple butcher? He's so dexterous." To which Marco replied with a slight smile, "Well, he's the king of gluttony, isn't he?" The funny thing is that instead of simply slitting the monster's throat, Gills sank his teeth into its neck. Biting through the thick skin, he tore out a piece of muscle and tendons. After eating this meat, the man said, "You are even more disgusting than the lizards. However, your meat is much more useful," Gills added, covered in a wild red aura. Fighting the Minotaur alone, the man asked that no one interfere, but promised to split the reward equally. Seeing the confusion on Melissa's face, Marco said, "Now you see the law of the jungle, his unique ability. When hunting animal monsters, the butcher's strength increases, while the monster's strength, on the contrary, decreases, as they feel an instinctive fear of him. The Minotaurs are an ideal target for Gills, but we must not let our guard down. So far, everything is going great. The man completely dominates the monster, constantly attacking. But everything can change at any second, because the Minotaur is the dungeon boss. "Hey, Scarecrow, the captain said you were dangerous, but so far you look more like my dinner than the boss," Gills shouted mockingly. In battle, he demonstrated incredible dexterity and the ability to handle a knife as if it were his own limb. And Melissa finally understood why Marco brought her to him. Seeing that the girl is disappointed in herself, our hero whispered, "Your strength is much more powerful. You're not limited to telekinesis alone. You have telepathy, which allows you to control the minds of other beings. If you can develop this power, you'll be able to control absolutely everyone. I didn't bring you to the butcher just to expose your weak points. It's much more important to learn from him how to distribute and transform power. If you master his technique, you'll be able to create new weapons, giving you telekinesis and close and ranged combat skills." After listening attentively to our hero, the girl asked in surprise, "Captain, how do you know so much about my abilities? Even though you previously managed the 711 squad, I don't think that helped you come to such conclusions." Marco smiled and replied, "You're right. I know you have so much because I—" But before he could finish, a loud and dull sound was heard. The Minotaur caught Gills in a mistake and slammed him into the wall. The man was seriously injured by the blow and lost consciousness. I think we can consider his participation in the battle over. So what our hero predicted happened, because he knew that the Minotaur would go into frenzy mode. In this state, the monster heals all its wounds and completely suppresses the law of the jungle. Marco had no doubt that Gills recognized the Minotaur's ability, since he used gluttony, but overestimated his powers. At that moment, Melissa rushed to help the butcher. To her surprise, Gills woke up and asked that no one interfere. For him, it was a matter of principle to personally kill the Minotaur. However, seeing that the enemy had become stronger, his confidence disappeared. But he was not going to give up. First of all, the boss bit the knives, depriving the butcher of his main weapon. Now it's all looking canon. Korea's strongest butcher fights a horned monster with his bare hands. It will be incredibly difficult to win without the law of the jungle and knives. However, Gills has defeated him before and can probably do it again. Using the Minotaur's strength against him, the butcher made the monster push its horns against the wall. All that remains is to simply cut his throat. The man apparently didn't know that the Minotaur's tail wasn't just for show, it was a full-fledged weapon. The monster grabbed Gills by the leg and threw her with all his strength. Melissa couldn't watch this anymore. The girl knew she had to intervene. As sad as it was for Marco, she was right. Just because he'd managed to defeat Gills in that life didn't mean he'd succeed in this one. Perhaps he'd won back then thanks to someone's help. But on the other hand, the butcher is incredibly stubborn. Helping him could ruin their relationship. And he is definitely a key figure in our hero's plan. Without him, everything else won't work. Running to help, the girl screamed, "Captain, I'm going to him! Your rear is on you!" "No, don't interfere too early!" Marco cried out in fear. "You'll break his fighting spirit!" These words made the girl stop. Moreover, it didn't look like he was about to lose or die. On the contrary, he was full of strength. As long as his fighting spirit is not broken, and he has a knife in his hand, he will fight. At the first attempt to attack, the Minotaur pierced the butcher with his horn. Seeing this, Melissa realized that this was the end. Gills would die. Marco had the same reaction, because without a man, his plans were over. Luckily, the butcher turned out to be a very strong guy, and the wounds he received did not kill him. Now he is on the verge of death, but the monster does not stop and continues its attack. Gills understood perfectly well that if everything continued at the same pace, he would die. And at the moment of realization, he whispered, "Help!" And at that very second, 3 of Marco's resurrected warriors plunged their swords into the Minotaur. But for the monster, it was like being hit with a toothpick. Our hero didn't even expect to kill the monster like that. It was necessary to distract him and remove the cartridge case. And to prevent the man from dying from blood loss, Marco cut off the monster's horn. But the butcher didn't care. He pulled the piece of horn out of the stomach himself. "Sorry if I interfered unnecessarily, but I thought you needed help," Marco said. "Of course it wasn't worth helping, but at least it will be easier now," Gills replied, trying to sound cool. These words inspired our hero that his plan would still be realized. Besides, the butcher is a very simple man. He won't follow anyone for money or power. People like him are driven exclusively by good deeds. The man laughed and said that now he owed him a debt. And that was exactly what Marco was trying to achieve. Now that the first goal has been achieved, it's worth focusing on the dungeon's main reward and killing the Minotaur. The resurrected warriors were the first to attack. Their goal was to distract the boss and prepare him for the final blow. From the last moment of resurrection, the warriors became much stronger and faster. Even the Minotaur in combat mode could not keep up with them. Apparently, the power of resurrected spirits grows along with the power of their owner. "I feel like I can't cope," the boss shouted, pulling out his last trump card. He summoned a huge battle axe. This came as a real surprise to Marco, as he had never heard of the Minotaur being able to summon weapons before. With the advent of the axe, the situation changed. The resurrected warriors began to lose. Every death of a soldier caused our hero great pain in his heart. However, thanks to this, he remembered that he had one more surprise. That same snake scale. By reflecting and refracting light, it allows the user to blend into their surroundings. Can be used once per day. In other words, this scale gives the effect of invisibility for some time. The Minotaur is a very primitive monster, so it is unlikely that he will be able to sense Marco. Taking advantage of the fact that the last warrior was still fighting, our hero decided to deliver the decisive blow. Sneaking up behind the boss, he swung his weapon and prepared to cut off the bull's head. However, to the man's surprise, the Minotaur was able to sense his approach. Ignoring the resurrected warrior, the monster attacked our hero. Marco miraculously managed to block his shot at the last moment. Melissa couldn't believe her eyes. She was sure the captain could handle it. But it didn't end there. "Continue your attack." The boss threw his axe at our hero. At that moment, trying to protect his master, the resurrected warrior tried to block the attack. But the axe went through him like a hot knife through butter. Marco narrowly dodged at the last moment, amazed by the monster's precision. After the failed attack, the Minotaur decided to go into close combat. He rushed towards the man to pierce him with his horns, when suddenly something strange and unexpected happened. Gills threw a vial of salt extract which Marco had given him at the monster, after which he shouted, "I understand everything!" Bulls have very poor eyesight but an excellent sense of smell. He finds you by smell. To avoid revealing his exact location, Marco nodded his head approvingly, thanking the man, after which he immediately went on the attack until the smell of the spice dissipated. Having jumped high enough to fly above the monster, our hero took careful aim, and with all his might he thrust the tyrant's sword straight into the Minotaur's neck. It would be practically impossible to survive after that. However, despite this, the boss was not going to die just like that. He summoned his axe, wishing to drag his killer away with him. Noticing this, Gills asked Melissa to cut the bull's tendons. The girl had to act quickly. Without any hesitation, she pointed her daggers at the monster. Her level of telekinesis was not enough to accurately cut the tendons on the moving arm, so she decided to focus on the still legs. However, this did not bring any significant result. Melissa was only able to slightly cut the tendon, but not cut it. Feeling the Minotaur begin to sway slightly, Marco whispered, "Okay, that's enough," after which he jumped off the monster and knocked it over. Under its own weight, the bull pushed the blade of the sword even further, piercing its own throat. Even the hand that held the axe stopped. It seemed like this was the end, but no. The Minotaur grabbed Marco by the leg with his tail, and with his last strength, he tried to cut our hero in half. Luckily, Melissa intervened at that moment and stopped the monster's axe with her threads. She managed to wrap them around the monster when she tried to cut his tendon. However, the monster was much stronger physically, and she would not be able to hold it off for long. And after just a few seconds, her body gave in. Coughing up blood profusely, the girl asked the captain for forgiveness for not being able to save him. "You have nothing to apologize for. I should thank you." "Thanks to you, we did it," Marco said, cutting the Minotaur in half with wild eyes. Now that the boss is split into two parts, we can definitely say that this is the end. For our hero, this fight became a demonstration that one cannot be 100% sure of everything if he did not know about it in his past life. Melissa and Gills were incredibly happy that they were able to survive and win. In total, they received 2 chests as a main and additional reward. When suddenly the butcher said, "It's a pity, of course, that there are only 2 chests, but I'm not claiming anything. After all, thanks to you and the girls, I stayed alive," Gills added, laughing. "I certainly helped, but Captain Marco did all the work," Melissa replied, embarrassed. For the girl and the butcher, this was the first time they had opened the chests, so they were eager to see the trophy. In the first chest, they found King Minos's white bull. It could be exchanged for 30,000 heads. Also in this chest was the red bull of King Minos, which could also be exchanged for the same amount of heads. Marco decided to give these figurines to Melissa and Gills so that the boys would not feel cheated. And he himself opened the second chest with the main reward. Inside, a Minotaur liver of the highest magical class awaited him. When consumed, it grants the user one of the monster's traits. A very strong appetite is also required. If the liver is underfed or the leftovers are spat out, it loses its freshness, resulting in a loss of effect. This liver was disgusting in appearance and smell and did not inspire any appetite. When suddenly Marco turned to Gills and said, "I give it to you, because it was you who did all the work and I only finished it." "Thanks, I guess, but I'm not sure I can eat this. It smells rotten," the butcher replied, confused. While Gills was thinking about whether to accept the gift or not, our hero simply took and shoved the Minotaur's liver into his mouth. "Don't mind the taste, just swallow it," Marco shouted, shoving the liver down the butcher's throat. Barely, but our hero made him eat every last piece. Convinced that the liver wouldn't go to waste, our hero finally let the man go. At first, Gills wanted to vomit from the terrible taste of rotten meat, but after just a couple of seconds, he felt changes in his body. By eating the Minotaur's liver, he gained its ability to regenerate, and the wound from the horn healed. "Wow, that's so cool!" Melissa cried out in surprise. "That's right. I feel like some kind of monster now. That's so cool!" Gills added, not holding back his emotions. All the guys were pleased with the awards they received, including Marco. In the second chest, there was a small box, which our hero took for himself. It contained an excerpt from the Grimoire of Teleportation, a fragment of a magical book that transports chosen ones to a specific location. To be honest, Marco didn't know how to react to such an award. He came across an object without a number. He had never seen anything like it in his past life, and that made it even more confusing. Noticing the disappointed face of our hero, Gills came up and said, "Listen, maybe you shouldn't have given me this liver. Don't worry, it was a gift, and besides, I wouldn't be able to get all the strength out of it. I'd need your talent for gluttony to absorb it," the man replied. It is difficult to hide the disappointment from receiving the award. However, the full value of this piece of paper can only be understood by learning its capabilities. The monster is killed, the rewards are received, which means there is nothing more to do in the dungeon. I won't hide the fact that our hero was hoping for a more significant reward, when suddenly, an information window appeared in front of him. The soul of the Minotaur has been discovered. Do you wish to subjugate it? At first, our hero thought it was some kind of glitch in the reward system, but at that moment, a creepy silhouette appeared from the monster's corpse, which resembled thick black smoke. It turns out that in his past life, the necromancer was only able to control the souls of people. What happened this time that made the system allow the soul of the defeated monster to be subjugated? But here's a surprise. At the second level of the abilities granted by Yoram, Marco is able to tame the souls of absolutely all creatures. But there was one small problem. All the spirit slots were filled. Getting the soul of a Minotaur is easy. Just release one of the existing spirits and free up a slot. However, our hero began to have serious doubts. After all, why would the soul of the monster he had defeated follow him? Trying to figure it out, he approached the spirit and said, "What is your goal? Are you clinging to me in the hope of continuing your existence?" At that moment, the black smoke began to clear, and the silhouette of the Minotaur turned into a man. "I understand your doubts about me, but I just want to get out of here," the man's spirit whispered. "What? So he was human all this time?" Gills asked in surprise. "The Minotaur is half man, half bull. The name of his human half is Asterion," Melissa answered thoughtfully. Our hero was pleasantly surprised that the girl had such deep knowledge of mythology. This is, of course, all wonderful, but the question still remains open. What to do with it? In the end, Marco decided to approach the issue in a rather mercantile manner. "What will I get in return if I free you? To do this, I need to destroy one of my spirits. Should I do this?" Our hero asked rudely. "You will get whatever you want, but it is not worth killing anyone for me because I myself do not want to kill anyone," answered Asterion. After which the spirit touched our hero's head, and everything around was filled with a bright white light. At that moment, Marco felt his whole body begin to behave in an incomprehensible way, as if something inside him had come to life, and only the information window that appeared explained what was happening. The Minotaur's essence was entering his body. After some time, the absorption process was completed. As a result, the number of souls summoned was increased from 3 to 4, and Asterion was able to get his battle armor back. Now Marco is 100% happy with this dungeon. After all, the great cursed knight Asterion serves him. In addition, absorbing the soul of the Minotaur strengthened the existing spirits. For our hero, this was another surprise, because the power of one should not influence everyone else. It shouldn't have, but it did, and there was no point in not being happy about it. This dungeon brought the man much more than he expected, and for his future plans, such strengthening was just right. After the boys left the dungeon, Marco asked them for only one thing: that they not tell anyone about what happened down below. The boys found the request strange, but they still agreed to fulfill it. Giles and Melissa understood that everyone had their own reasons for staying in the shadows as long as possible. Besides, it was much more profitable for them to be friends with Marco than to quarrel with him. It can be said that after this raid, the men became good friends and allies. Before leaving, our hero said, "Hey, Butcher, it's a pity that the seasoning broke, but don't waste your head on it. It's better to take care of the weapon." "Are you leaving already?" Gills asked, upset. "I'm afraid so. There's still a lot to do, but I'm sure we'll meet soon," answered Marco. "I almost forgot. I have a small favor to ask," our hero added with a slight smile. He wanted the butcher to look for a man in the Novon area named Mansu, who ran a hardware store. In his past life, Mansa was called the King of Handicrafts. He could make anything, be it a tool or a survival item. Gills didn't know anyone named Mansu, but he had many friends from the Novon area, so he promised to help in any way he could. Left alone, Melissa asked our hero what they would do next. "I told you you need to learn a few things from the gills," Marco replied, surprised. "That's not what I mean," the girl replied defiantly. "I mean, what are we going to do with my dad?" Melissa said, trying to contain her emotions. "So, have you chosen a side after all?" "As I said before, Daeho can't do anything without strength. There's no point in openly opposing your father for now. You need to become stronger by fighting monsters. The best option for you would be to take command of the monster-catching group," Marco replied coldly. "I understand," the girl added thoughtfully. Noticing that she was still having a hard time coming to terms with the thought of her father, our hero whispered, "Your father, although not the most pleasant person, will not destroy the country to the ground in order to own something." "It's funny you speak as if you know my father well," Melissa replied, surprised. "However, right now, Daeho is not the main problem, and not even the monsters. Nowadays, fanatics pose a great threat to the world. Now they are just a bunch of idiots who go out to pointless protests. But according to Marco, the city of Incheon may soon disappear because of them. To be more precise, not because of the fanatics themselves, but because of the Chonil Corporation. This corporation is run by a rather dubious man named Shin. He started out as a small businessman in the city of Incheon, but quickly rose to national prominence. Initially, the Chonil Company was an ordinary gang, but thanks to the right connections, Shin was able to turn it into a legitimate structure. And now, with the apocalypse looming outside, this Shin decided to quickly change the vector of his activities and created a religious cult. And here's the most interesting thing. One of the prophets should soon join him. Marco promised to tell us all the details in a couple of days at the port of Incheon. And this time, Melissa must spend on training. The burden of responsibility on her shoulders is great, because the fate of the entire country depends on her. Meanwhile, Marty had already arrived for our hero. "You're on time as always, not a minute late," the guy said joyfully, seeing the man. "Well, of course, I couldn't leave my beloved daughter alone for so long," Marco replied, stroking Alice's head. The girl was glad to see her father safe and sound after he came out of the dungeon. Just one look showed how much she was worried about him. When suddenly Marty asked, "Captain, did you tell that government agent about your reincarnation?" "No, it's better to maintain the image of a suspiciously powerful man. Besides, the prophets clearly know about me, so they might start hunting me like crazy, so I need to stay in the shadows as long as possible. Otherwise, they'll start flooding Korea to test me out. Just like Alec Trayman and Ninagawa Erika," our hero answered excitedly. Noticing that Marco was too excited about all of this, Alice whispered, "Daddy, don't strain yourself, please, you know." And indeed, the man looked pretty lousy. He hadn't slept properly for quite some time, and the fight with the Minotaur had exhausted him. Marty and Alice insisted that he sleep, and that they would wake him up as soon as they arrived. Being surrounded by reliable and, most importantly, family people, our hero finally relaxed. They traveled without any problems. The road was smooth. There were no monsters. In general, it was a normal trip. But at some point, Marco felt a drop of water fall on his nose, which is why he woke up. Opening his eyes, the man saw only rocks and a small beam of light falling on his face. While he was trying to figure out what was going on, he felt something warm in his pocket. Marco reached into his pocket and pulled out the very same piece of paper he had received as a reward for defeating the Minotaur. At first, our hero thought that this bundle created some kind of dimension, but the inscriptions spoke of the beginning of some kind of test. Without any consent or warning, Marco was signed up for the quest, Lana's Lair. Every day, everything becomes more and more interesting. In his past life, the man never heard of this quest. And since this is a lair, that means there must be monsters here, which means you need to be on your guard. A few seconds later, a creepy red portal appeared at the end of a small corridor. It will be impossible to refuse to complete the quest once it is started. In other words, Marco will either complete this lair or die here. It's pretty risky to agree when you don't even know what the reward will be. Therefore, guided by common sense, he decided to refuse to participate in this test. But at that moment, Asterion appeared and prevented him from doing this. "What the hell are you doing? I didn't summon you!" Marco shouted in surprise. And in response, the spirit only pointed towards the portal. "You want me to agree?" our hero asked in surprise. And in response, Asterion nodded his head approvingly. No matter how you look at it, he was the master of the labyrinth. And this ticket was the reward. Apparently, Asterion knows something about all this. In this case, casting aside all doubts, Marco accepts the quest, Land's Lair. The portal looked like this. Something incredibly dangerous was waiting for them inside. Upon entering it, the man felt a slight electric shock, after which the portal closed. Our hero didn't really like the idea of the victory or death dungeon, when suddenly a powerful, ominous voice came into his head. "Who are you? Who greets guests like that? You first show yourself. I got this ticket in the Minotaur's labyrinth," Marco shouted, taking the package out of his pocket. Afterwards, the man tried to find out who exactly he was talking to, after which a pair of bright red eyes appeared at the end of the tunnel. "Come into the light," the huge monster said. The name Land does not belong to the monster, but to its master. When Marco saw this big guy, he was seriously scared, because he was many times bigger than the Minotaur. Not wanting to show his true emotions, he quickly pulled himself together and whispered, "It's unlikely that it's you. Where is Land, then?" "What a clever little fellow. Try to find him." The monster with the head of a wolf, a goblin, an eagle, a bull, and a man answered through laughter. Putting on the creepiest smile imaginable, the man replied, "So you ate him." Meanwhile, the supreme beings were angry. Some of them were very unhappy that Marco had ended up in Land's lair. Some took it more calmly because they knew that the regressor would change all their plans. And some even had the courage to admit that they had made a mistake by creating the possibility of regression. However, the past can no longer be changed, so they decided to change the future, bringing it closer to something that even our hero doesn't know about. After all, this was the only way they could maintain some kind of balance. And not everyone liked this idea. And the main opponent of any changes was Yor, which is not surprising, since changing the future deprives him of any guarantee that Marco will win. However, this decision was made by the majority. The other phases didn't like that Marco had a huge advantage, depriving their prophets of any chance to win. During a heated discussion, one of the phases said with a sly laugh, "Who would have thought that a regressor would come to such a loser as you?" Unable to bear such insults addressed to him, Yoram personally appeared and shouted, "Is it not for you to carry this nonsense, witness of the sun and the moon? Or should I call you Tur? As we all remember, it was you who created rebirth for your precious Alec, and now you're complaining about injustice? Do you think we're all idiots? We don't give a damn about your prophet or you. Just admit that you're upset that the reincarnated one isn't yours. You're our just one," Yoram added. And after these words, Tur could no longer bear it. He, like Alec, is incredibly proud. "Yoram, watch your long tongue. Our ambitions are not needed here. The future is important," Tur shouted. And surprisingly, the other phases also supported him, assuring the Lord of Snakes that the changes would have little effect on his prophet. "Okay, but then ask all your questions to the one who sent my prophet to the monster that's supposed to appear in 30 years. And if he returns from there alive, you're next," Yoram replied, taking his seat. Now all he could do was believe that Marco would be able to get through Land's lair. At this point, we return back to our hero. The monster ridiculed our hero's words about eating his own master and warned him not to anger him. But being already quite experienced, Marco knew that it made absolutely no difference whether he angered his master or not. A fight could not be avoided anyway. When suddenly a woman's head whispered, "I can't understand how they could choose prophets for you." "It's none of your business. If you have nothing more for me, just get lost," the man replied indifferently. "Oh my God, you're so rude, just like a Yoram. No wonder you two found common ground," the eagle head added, after which the monster extended his palm in which something lay. Taking a closer look, Marco realized that it was a piece of fresh flesh. Seeing the bewilderment on his face, the monster whispered, "Just a piece of Land's flesh is enough. This will be your test. The reward won't disappoint you. If you're lucky, you'll even be able to master the power of the phases themselves," the monster added. "What? Are you saying that some piece of meat grants me the power of a higher being?" Marco asked in surprise. "Exactly," the beast replied in a hoarse voice. "Incredible! But who is Lan?" "It seems the composition of the phases doesn't change. There are always 8 of them," our hero added thoughtfully. "Not quite so. There is no constant composition. In all worlds, including yours, phases alternate from time to time. And the Land dynasty are the most ancient of the lords. I'm not talking about those bags that just opened the carnival, but the beings that ruled during the time of Olympus and Muspelheim, truly mighty creatures who created existence. However, as I said, times change, and so do the leaders, the monster replied. Our hero just learned the whole story. All the ancient legends and myths were true. They were part of previous carnivals. However, it's not that simple. For you, this is all more than just a game. Carnival is an engine of progress or regression, which are essentially two extremes of the same thing. In all eras, the phases created the carnival to move the world forward, although they did so at a terrible cost. Having learned all this, Marco laughed out loud, after which he shouted, "Since when is the history of the world written by beings alien to it?" Extending his finger, the monster added, "It's not that simple. In a sense, you are the key to the carnival, provoking the phenomenon and unraveling it. We've been around much longer than you have, and we're just helping you get on stage." Hearing this, Marco smiled and whispered, "Well, of course." "I've made my decision," the man added, grabbing a piece of meat. Our hero had no doubt that everything he had just been told was an absolute lie. Moreover, at this moment, the monster began to demand too persistently that he eat this piece of flesh, which only added confidence to our hero in his own words. After thinking for a while, Marco said, "Listen, if you were able to absorb the phases, then what the hell are you doing here? I'll be honest, you were incredibly convincing. But did you really think I'd believe you?" Our hero added, crushing the piece of flesh that the monster gave him. And this made the monster very angry, when suddenly the goblin's head whispered, "Impressive, but on the other hand, disappointing. I could taste you if you swallowed this flesh. I'm sure your soul is quite appetizing." Pleased with himself, Marco replied, "Childish trick, but you tried." Well, it was close enough, because at some point our hero almost believed him. At some point, hundreds of golden hands began to burst out of the monster's body, and finally, he attained the form of a three-headed, thousand-armed Buddha. Having seen its true form, Marco was convinced that he was not mistaken in the fact that this creature was capable of absorbing phases. At that moment, this deity took our hero by the hand and whispered, "You have not disappointed me. You deserve a reward. I understand your confusion, but I am not who you think I am. By my nature, I am that which has neither beginning nor end, and everything I said was not entirely better. I have witnessed every carnival, past and future. Therefore, your reward will be my knowledge of the future for the next 20 years, the creature added in a gentle whisper. And just a second later, Marco woke up in a cold sweat sitting in the back seat of the car. Now he had a question. Was everything that happened a dream or the truth? Feeling something strange, he saw a huge chain wrapped around his left hand that was emitting a strange glow. Not understanding what was going on at all, he heard Alice's frightened scream. "Daughter, did something happen?" Marco asked worriedly, getting out of the car. "Some people made us stop, but that's not what matters," the girl answered in a trembling voice.